Hello, everyone. It's long awaited day. Welcome to Empowering True Crime News. Oh my gosh, let me see. Let me make sure that you hear my sound. And yes, okay, great. And I just wanted to just say hi, hello, and hi. And so just wanted to go over this together. I'm going to be doing, I figured I might as well just stream this with you all together since I'm going to be watching it. And so, yes, I look forward to hearing this more with you. And okay, so let me know in the comments what you think. Will he plead guilty or not guilty? So, brief background. Brian Kohberger, who has been accused of killing the 4 University of Idaho students. And the lighting in my room is awful. It's raining today, so the lighting is way weird, but I look strange in this lighting. Okay, so let me know. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I got caught off guard. So we have Brian Kohberger accused of killing 4 Idaho students. And hold on one second. Let me just see if I can put this down here. Okay. So Brian Kohberger accused 4 students, Maddie Mogan, Kaylee Gonzalez. Oh, let me just see here. Okay. I'm actually going to pull up the, I was watching this.
And let's see if there is a sequence of exterior shots that they were just transmitting back to News Nation affiliated stations like ours. And so we'll try to come back to this if they do, in fact, play this video. In fact, what we'll do is we'll bring that up between Jennifer and I so that if it starts playing, we can kind of all see it here together.
So this is WFLA right now. Sorry, I know I keep kind of getting cut off, but the arraignment is supposed to be happening right now at 9 a.m. Idaho time. And reporters are already in there. We aren't able to see the live stream as it happens of the proceedings because that's the Judge John Judge said no. But there is a media pool, and there will be a stream available later. So I'm just kind of keeping tabs here with WFLA. They have Jennifer Coffendorfer, ex-FBI, who is also an expert that's being interviewed, and they're answering some questions. So yes, so while I speak, I'm also wanted to show the Brian Enton, who is there live right now inside the courtroom. And let's see if we can see what he says. And I'm going to refresh on him. He says that, Brian Kohberger just came in. He says he doesn't see any of Brian Kohberger's family, but there's also an overflow room that he can't see. And it's totally quiet in here waiting. All you hear is reporters typing, and Olivia Gonzalez or Olivia Stevenson, Kaylee's sister, his baby is making soft cooing noises. He says he counts about 25 people here sitting in the family section. A lot of people I have not seen before. Many are already emotional. Family is on one side, media is on the other, about 50 people total. The victim families are arriving into the courtroom, and Kaylee's sister Olivia has her baby with her. So that's Olivia Stevenson. And the prosecutor, Bill Thompson, is in there as well. So I'll continue to... Kohberger is wearing an orange jail jumpsuit, seems to be wearing a bulletproof vest underneath. Wow. Okay. So let me put the volume back up.
Still no tweet from Brian signifying that Judge has entered the courtroom yet for the arraignment to officially begin. Once, of course, he enters the courtroom, that will signify the beginning of the arraignment. Again, the arraignment is going to be a formal presentation of the charges from the indictment. And then, of course, Brian Kohberger is expected to enter a plea of not guilty. But we'll, of course, follow this in real time on Twitter. And then the moment that we're allowed to give you the video from inside and transmit the video from inside the courtroom, we will do so here live.
So that looks like Steve Gonzalez just walking in here.
This is believed to be in the last hour at some point. Again, this is courtesy of our friends at News Nation. Jennifer?
And you heard JB Brian describe that it's emotional already in that courtroom, and I would very much expect that. This is really difficult for these victim families, and this is their first time being back in the presence and realizing now things are going to move forward.
Coming in, everybody, WFLA senior investigator Walt Buteau is sitting down here with us on stream. You're going to sit right over there, Walt. Yes, you can come sit down. The feed, folks, just ended. That was all the B-roll coming from the Latah County Courthouse. We'll get Walt in the saddle here and get him ready to go here in just a moment. Let's bring you back in with Jennifer Koffendorfer and myself. Brian Enton tweeting out a moment ago, and we'll continue to read his tweets here aloud. Let's see. Kohberger is wearing an orange jail jumpsuit, seems to be wearing a bulletproof vest underneath. Judge is reading Kohberger his rights and the charges. Kohberger is looking straight ahead and nodding a bit to show that he understands what the judge is saying. That's the last tweet. So the arraignment itself has officially begun, Jennifer. So far, very procedural. This is exactly what we were expecting as far as today. Brian doesn't note if there's any difference in appearance with Brian Kohberger, or if it's just exactly what we.
All right, so we are at the arraignment of Brian Kohberger, who's accused of killing the 4 University of Idaho students. He was indicted by a grand jury last week, which pretty much expedited everything. Instead of having a preliminary hearing where both the defense and prosecution submits their evidence, instead, what ended up happening is the grand jury is now going to, or the grand jury said, hey, there is enough probable cause to go to trial. So what happens today is that there's an arraignment where Brian Kohberger will plead guilty or not guilty. It's expected he will plead not guilty just because he's already made comments about looking forward to being exonerated. But, you know, one can always wonder. Obviously, he has that right to say whether or not he's guilty or not guilty. So that's what we're waiting for. And I'm just using WFLA because I want to, they're going to be live streaming. So they're going to be showing the live stream. So in other words, by law, they cannot show the live stream until it's publicly available. And Brian Enton just tweeted, he says here, Kohberger just said, yes, I do, when judge asked if he understands anything he says can be used against him. And the judge is now going over the indictment with Kohberger. Let's see what WLF.
I bet in this case it does. And then you can see the defendant's family if they're there on one side. And by taking a distant view, you can sort of hear emotions sometimes, gasps, and see the emotions. And that's, of course, important because it is obviously a crime, a horrible crime, just gut-wrenching, especially the 2 girls who were best friends since grammar school. Heartbreaking. Go to college together. And so that part's heartbreaking, but the drama is there and the reaction is there. And the reaction sometimes can be very important.
Yeah. And that's why Brian Enton is pointing out some of his observations. And we'll all be able to see this at some point in the not too distant future. We're just waiting on the arraignment itself to conclude before we can actually transmit the video. Other video feeds are coming in. This is one of our other feeds. This is the path coming in from one of our other affiliations. It's frozen on something. I'm not sure exactly what this is. We will come back to this. But again, just pointing out that we're accessing all the feeds that we can inside and outside the courthouse once we are legally allowed to do so. But, oh, actually, hold on a second. No, okay. So now we have more B-roll coming in. This is the same B-roll that we had from earlier. We'll leave this up here on your screen as we read through some more tweets from our own Brian Enton of News Nation, senior national correspondent with, of course, News Nation. So let's read his latest tweet. The judge is reading Kohberger his rights and charges. Kohberger is looking straight ahead, nodding. We know that. Kohberger just said, "Yes, I do," when the judge asked if he understands anything that he says can be used against him. That's, of course, very standard. Judge is now going over the indictment with Kohberger, or the, I want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. But yes, so this is all happening right now, Walt. And so next up is, of course, he's going to enter a plea of either guilty or not guilty, and we expect it to be not guilty.
Yeah. And I think that obviously that would be the one surprise from here, other than an outburst. But again, with the family there, I imagine as much as Brian Entin and other reporters would look for that, exactly what happens in that scene, it must be, I imagine, extremely difficult for family members of the victims to be that close to someone who allegedly just brutally destroyed their lives in a lot of ways and murdered these young individuals.
Brian Entin sharing out here that the judge is going over the
There's a
inducement with
her
Kohberger.
baby. Oh, she's carrying her.
What do you make of that,
sweet.
Jennifer, as far as his last tweet? Do you follow exactly where we are as far as the indictment?
This is Kaylee's family.
Yeah, he's just really reading the charges. Again, that's all that indictment is going to contain. And this is going absolutely as expected. It's just a procedure, and there's typically no fireworks and no.
Yeah. So again, this is video from January. We're going to get the video here shortly. How tense, Walt, can it be in that courtroom when all of these months have passed? Everyone, your life is different now than what you had, of course, in January or November of last year. What's the tension in that courtroom like right now, especially considering you have the family members of the victims, seeing many of them, I'm sure, if they weren't at the court hearings in January, they might be seeing Brian Kohberger
in the flesh for the first time.
For the first time. What do you make of that?
I tend to put myself in my role as a father with something like that. It's a nightmare. And I've been, I think, in 3 different cases where those emotions boiled over and somebody actually tried to jump the defendant.
Wow.
That's the worst case scenario and the most dramatic scenario. But I think you will see a mix of family members trying to stare down the defendant, try to get him to look them in the eye. And I think that's one thing a reporter looks at. What did the defendant look at? Did the defendant make any attempt to look back at who was looking at him? And what are the family members looking at? And how do they react to each and every word? I think Jennifer said, this is theoretically going to be routine, but there's definitely nothing routine about it emotionally for those family members, because their lives, we will cover this case for as long as it takes, but it never ends for those victims' families, ever. And that's why we look back at cases that are 10 years old and 15 years old, because you hear the word closure. And we discussed this with the Brian Laundrie case. There is no I don't believe there's any closure, obviously, for anything like this, whether it's a verdict, a guilty verdict, the death penalty. There's no closure. You lost a love of your life, and they're gone forever. And they're gone in the most brutal way that it can happen. And a stabbing. There's nothing more personal and face-to-face than a stabbing. And for the family members, I just imagine them playing that over and over. Why did it happen? We still don't have a motive, correct?
Right. Jennifer has been among many who have opined on what a potential motive.
So I'm actually watching Brian Entin live on Twitter, and I know that they're going to probably just repeat what I'm going to say, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. So Brian Entin is saying that the judge is reading each victim's names as he goes over the murder charges: Madison Mogan, Kaylee Gonzalez, Xana Carnoto, Ethan Chapin. and that the judge tells Kohberger the maximum penalty is life in prison or death, Kohberger says yes, that he understands the charges and penalties, and that Kohberger is standing silent. So the judge is entering not guilty pleas, which apparently in Idaho, you have the option to not give a plea, and that automatically by default means they'll give it a not guilty plea. So I'm sure we'll hear more commentary on that from Jennifer Koffendorfer.
Platforms will be tweeting out and sharing out on Instagram and Facebook details about that significant hearing. We'll talk more about.
So yeah, so basically, Brian Kohberger has given not guilty, is not guilty plea by default.
To Brian Entin's Twitter. Let's read the latest that came in. Okay, the judge is reading each victim's name as he goes over the murder charges. Madison Mogan, Kaylee Gonzalez, Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin. Judge tells Kohberger the maximum penalty is life in prison or death. Kohberger says yes, that he understands the charges and the penalties. Kohberger is, quote unquote, standing silent. So the judge is entering not guilty pleas. The prosecution now has 60 days to seek the death penalty. Kohberger's attorney is asking the judge to set the trial for October. She says it will take at least 4 weeks, maybe 6.
Wow,
so now they're getting into conversations. Jennifer, we talked about this earlier, whether or not we were going to get a relative trial window. October is much sooner than I was anticipating, especially when you're talking about the mountain of digital evidence that they have to go through. So whether or not this actually happens, we'll find out what the judge says. Judge, by the way, if I say judge, that is because the judge's name is Judge. Judge John Judge. So Judge is going to be discussing that back and forth now with each legal team. But I find this is the most interesting. Everything has been relatively procedural up until this point, but Kohberger is standing silent, so the judge entered not guilty pleas. So that leads us to believe that Kohberger himself did not say the words not guilty.
That was one of the 3 possibilities we read about, right? That if he did not say anything, the judge would enter that for him. And you wonder, why wouldn't he say those words? Is there a legal advantage of some sort? I doubt it, but why wouldn't he say not guilty?
That's undoubtedly, Jennifer, is that, I mean, that seems to me like a very calculated decision to not, if again, we're reading this correctly, and we'll have the video here soon, so we'll be able to see for ourselves and hear for ourselves, but to not have the defendant in the case enter himself a plea of not guilty verbally, what does that signify to you?
Oh, to me, that signifies somebody who has made a decision to keep the control. He's not going to be forced to say the words not guilty. He's going to force somebody else to say it. So I'm not surprised. We knew this was a possibility, but we knew that not guilty would be the outcome today.
A bit of breaking news from News Nation's Brian Entin in the courtroom. The Brian Kohberger trial has a date set for October 2nd at 8:30 a.m.
That's quick.
I never...
But it can be delayed.
Obviously. Absolutely. So again, bringing everybody back on screen here, right to a speedy trial. Those aren't just words. That actually is, of course, the law in this country. You have a right to a speedy trial. And so people...
That's actually, that's great news. I mean, if he really is not guilty, then I would want a speedy trial. I mean, if I was really not guilty, I would want a speedy trial. I don't want to spend extra time in jail. I don't want to spend 3-4 years of my life in jail for something I didn't commit. But then there's also the fact that he didn't say not guilty. So that to me is suspicious. I don't know. What do you guys think? Does that sound suspicious?
This does not get delayed years, but this is a pretty aggressive trial date that has been set for October 2nd at 8:30 a.m. And a plea of not guilty has been entered by the presiding.
Oh, sorry.
And court has been adjourned, according to Brian Entin. So it's all over after about, it started about, I think, 15 minutes ago. It didn't start at exactly 9 Pacific. It started about, let's see here. No, okay, so it was about 12 minutes, roughly or so, 12 minutes. So we'll have 12 minutes of video to play back. So now the answer that I want to know is whether or not the judge and whether or not district court in Idaho will permit the pool camera feed to then distribute the video so that we can play that back. Jennifer, we were talking about the 2 additional motion hearings
Oh gosh, I'm so sorry about that. Okay, let me present my screen again and see what the heck is going on.
1 terabyte, and it depends. So 1 terabyte of data could mean so many different things. To your point, it could be documents, it could be pictures, it could be video, and also too
could be audio.
Could be audio.
Audio is going to take
voicemails.
up more, absolutely. Voicemails, text messages, everything.
And I know in dealing with so much video, that compression is a huge deal. Sometimes videos get compressed for things like storage on the cloud or storage on a device. Sometimes videos uncompressed and it's much, much larger. So 51 terabytes doesn't tell us all that much. Okay, the pool feed is being queued up.
Woo.
Let's listen in here. This is officially now, I want to make sure that we have this right. This is now a replay. This is the pool camera footage being transmitted out to stations across the country. So they have queued it up. They are about to play it, and we're going to hear it here live on stream for the first time. But again, this is a replay from approximately 30 minutes ago. So what they're doing now is they're beginning on this first frame. They are alerting stations across the country to get ready to receive this video. This is how pool camera situations work. It's queued up. It's kind of ready to go. And then they will hit play once they get the green light. During this, what we're going to do is Walt and I and guests we will remain quiet. We will listen in. I'll try to boost up the audio as much as possible here in the stream center so we could hear as much as possible. And then afterwards, we're going to break down some of your observations, some of your questions. We'll be looking for #HeyJB, #HeyWalt in the YouTube comment section. So the video now is being queued up. They've now gone to the closed door. So what we're going to see is Idaho murder suspect Brian Kohberger enter the courtroom. We're going to see Judge read out the indictment. Let's bring up audio. And we're waiting for, again, the pool camera team. They are alerting all stations. We also have a backup feed in the event that this one goes out. But again, this is the indictment for those of you just joining us. The indictment of Brian Kohberger, the lone suspect in the murders of 4 University of Idaho students in November of last year. He is facing 4 first-degree murder charges as well as a charge of burglary as well.
The silence we're experiencing now as we wait for the video.
There it is.
There
Let's
you
listen
go.
in.
Okay.
Brian Kohberger. And the third defense attorney.
All rise. Thank you very much. Please be seated. Good morning, everybody. We have some people on Zoom here too, so we're going to I waive. Okay, let's get on the record, please. Thank you. Okay, we are now on the record in State of Idaho versus Brian C. Kohberger, CR 29222803. Mr. Kohberger is in the courtroom along with his attorney, Ms. Taylor. I believe also part of the team is Jay Logston and Elisa Massa, who is participating by Zoom, I believe. The state is represented by Mr. Thompson, Lake County Prosecutor's Office, or Prosecuting Attorney. Ms. Jennings is of that office too, Lake County Prosecutor's Office. Also part of that team is Ingrid Beatty and Jeff Nye, both from the Idaho Attorney General's Office. I'm John Judge. If you don't know me, I'm a Lake County District Judge, and I'll be presiding over this case. So, Mr. Kohberger, you've already heard a lot of what I'm going to tell you at your initial appearance, but I'll repeat it to you because it's important, and I want to remind you of these issues. So I'll briefly cover your rights, the charges against you, and the maximum penalties if you are found guilty or if you plead guilty. So I'm going to start with the rights. You have a constitutional right to have an attorney represent you throughout these proceedings. If you cannot afford to hire a lawyer, then one is appointed at public expense. Ms. Taylor and her team have already been appointed, so that's taken care of. You have a right to a speedy and public jury trial where the state would be required to prove every element of each charge against you beyond a reasonable doubt. At that trial, you would have the right to cross-examine the witnesses called against you. That means to see, hear, and question them, to call witnesses to testify for you, and if you choose to testify in your own defense. But you're not required to testify because you also have a right of silence. That right is protected under the Idaho and federal constitutions, so you can remain silent throughout these court proceedings, and that can't be held against you. What you do need to remember, though, is that anything you do say, other than to your lawyers, could be used against you in a later court proceeding. You understand that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. You also have a right to appeal any final decision of the court. In order to exercise that right, you need to file a notice of appeal within 42 days of that final decision, or that right is waived. Also, if you are not a United States citizen, any finding of guilt in this state could have adverse consequences to your legal status. Do you understand these rights?
Yes.
Any questions about the rights?
No.
All right. So let's go to the indictment. You have a copy of the indictment in front of you?
Yes.
Thank you. And you see in the heading your name there. Is that your correctly spelled complete name?
Yes, it is.
Is that the correct birth date underneath your name?
Yes.
Are those the correct last four digits of your social security number?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to read you the charges on the indictment, starting with count 1, burglary. That is a felony under Idaho Code Section 18-1401 and 1403. This alleges that you, on or about November 13, 2022, in Lake County, State of Idaho, did unlawfully enter a residence located at 1122 King Road, Moscow, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder. Count 2, murder in the first degree. That was a felony under Idaho Code Section 18-4001, 4002, 4003, and 4004. This alleges that you, on or about November 13, 2022, in Lake County, State of Idaho, did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and with malice aforethought, kill and murder Madison Mogan, a human being, by stabbing Madison Mogan, from which she died. Count 3, murder in the first degree, a felony under Idaho Code Section 18-4001, 4002, 4003, and 4004. This alleges that you, on or about November 13, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and with malice aforethought, kill and murder Kayla Gonsalves, a human being, by stabbing Kayla Gonsalves from which she died. Count 4, murder in the first degree. That's a felony under Idaho Code Section 18-4001, 4002, 4003, and 4004. Alleging that you, on or about November 13, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and with malice aforethought, kill and murder Zana Kernodle. Excuse me. This is hard. I'm sorry. Zana Kernodle,
Get the names
a
right.
human being, by stabbing Zana Kernodle, from which she died. Count 5, murder in the first degree. This is a felony under Idaho Code Section 18-4001, 4002, 4003, and 4004. This alleges that you, on or about November 13, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and with malice aforethought, kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being, by stabbing Ethan Chapin, from which he died. This is signed on May 16, 2023, by the presiding grand juror. So now I'm going to go to the maximum penalties of each charge, starting with count 1, burglary, minimum 1 year, up to 10 years in imprisonment, fine of up to $50,000, or both fine and imprisonment, restitution for the victim's economic losses resulting from the crime. For counts 2, 3, 4, and 5, murder in the first degree, maximum penalties, life in prison, or the death penalty. Fine of up to $50,000, or both fine and life in prison or the death penalty. Restitution for the victim's economic losses resulting from the crime. Also, additional fine of up to $5,000 to be paid directly to the victim's families. If you are found guilty or plead guilty on each charge, and the maximum sentences are imposed consecutively, that means one right after the other, you could be facing 10 years in prison, followed by 4 consecutive life sentences or death penalties, fines of up to $200,000 and $20,000 to be paid directly to the families, with any restitution resulting from the crimes. Okay. Mr. Kohberger, do you understand the charge in count 1?
Yes.
Do you understand the maximum penalty?
Yes.
Do you understand the charge in count 2, murder in the first degree?
Yes.
Do you understand the maximum penalty?
Yes.
Do you understand the charge in count 3, murder in the first degree?
Yes.
Do you understand the maximum penalty?
Yes.
Do you understand the charge in count 4, murder in the first degree?
Yes.
Do you understand the maximum penalty?
Yes.
Do you understand the charge in count 5, murder in the
Yes.
first degree? Do you understand the maximum penalty?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Taylor, is Mr. Kohberger prepared to plead to these charges?
Your Honor, we will be standing silent.
Okay, because Mr. Kohberger is standing silent, I'm going to enter not guilty pleas. on each charge, counts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, at this juncture, the state has 60 days to give notice of intention to seek the death penalty. And Mr. Kohberger has a constitutional and statutory right to a speedy trial. So let's start with you, Ms. Taylor, and then Mr. Thompson to discuss some scheduling.
Your Honor, we'd ask the court to set this trial at the very outside of the speedy trial, right? We're not prepared to do anything but ask the court to do that today.
Okay. Have we counted out when that will be? November?
I have not counted it out, Your Honor, but I believe that would be about November 22nd is when the speedy will run. Maybe November 20th, something like that. So I'd ask the court to set it for an October trial date.
How long do you think it will take to try the case?
My best guess is it would take at least 4 weeks, maybe 6.
So you'd like me to set this for a 6-week trial?
At this point, I would, Your Honor.
Well, and in order to do so, I will have to get rid of some of the other 3 trials I have, but this is more critical and more important. So, Mr. Thompson, what's your?
Those trial dates are workable for the state judge.
Thank you. About October 2nd, starting
Yes, sir.
okay, for 6 weeks.
Yes, sir.
Anything else we need to address today, Ms. Taylor?
Not with regards to the trial setting.
Anything else?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
Nothing to say at this time now.
All right. So with that, by the way, I do want to let everybody know, if they don't already know this, that once the grand jury issued the indictment, the preliminary hearing scheduled to start on June 26th was no longer needed and was vacated. So some people are confused about that. So I thank counsel and the media and the public for your attention and respect. So we are adjourned. Thank you.
Ryan Kohberger electing to stand silent, and the judge entering a plea of not guilty on the 5 charges, 4 for first-degree murder, an additional charge for burglary as well. JB Buno, WFLA senior investigator Walt Buteau here with you live in the WFLA Now Stream Center. We're really going to hone in now on your reaction, folks, your comments. We use our hashtag system here in the Stream Center. So if you use hashtag HeyWalt, hashtag HeyJB, I think Jennifer Coffindaffer might still be hanging around. She's invited to pop back on whenever she'd like. I see her in the corner of my screen as well. But either any of the hashtags on your screen, and we can bring up your questions, your comments. Well, I want to give you the opportunity to react here first. I have a couple of things to point out as well. But let's start with you.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know if confidence is the right word, but he definitely answered the judge's questions. And you don't always hear that, believe it or not. You don't always hear that from defendants. There's sometimes at least a hint of shame might not be the right word, but in his case, he answered every question very directly, full voiced, spoke up, except when it came to the plea, when he remained silent, and we knew he had remained silent for the plea and that the judge had to enter the not guilty plea for him. So it sort of, I guess, maybe surprised me that he was sort of so forthcoming and spoke up so much when he was asked those other questions. What did you think?
The word that I'm going to use is very present.
Yes.
Alert.
Yeah.
And
like he was asking like he was being asked questions about what'd you do last night? Or he was being asked.
But he made clear he was enunciating his responses.
Yeah.
And I was thinking back during over the course of us watching this, I was thinking, my goodness, he is very coherent. And I think back to some of the trials, and our audience members on WFLA Now in our comment section know what I'm talking about when we're talking about some cases like Darrell Brooks, which was all over the place, just straight chaos at every turn.
Unbelievable, really.
Talking, of course, about Alex Murdaugh, where it was, there was points where he was, just crying. He was just covered in tears as far as emotion. I think back to Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, where there was smirks and twitches. And I know that we're really early on in this process, but this was as straightforward, direct, coherent, and concise of responses as you'll hear from a defendant.
I saw one of the first January 6th Bay Area defendants, one of the first Bay Area defendants from January 6th during a federal hearing where cameras aren't allowed in it, as the judge was reading the charges against him, actually, I should say, put his head on the table, just went thump like that in a federal courtroom.
Did he hurt himself?
No, he just was sort of like, if I was interpreting it, it was sort of, what did I do? And that, of course, was not nearly as serious as this. But yeah, this guy was definitely very straightforward. Like you said, very present. And the only reason maybe we're surprised by that is because we knew ahead of time he did not enter a plea. And I think Jennifer makes a good point. Was that about control? I'm controlling this. You're not controlling this. I'll answer your questions, but you're not controlling whether what I say for my plea. But at the end of the day, the judge controlled it.
And I look. Did you observe arrogance? Is that what you're saying? Did you see someone?
I would say more confidence than arrogance.
Okay.
And there's a difference.
Yeah.
Just more of again, I sort of expected soft-spoken maybe, as opposed.
No, he enunciated very clearly his responses.
Yes.
And it almost reminded me of some of the traffic stop videos that we had seen where he was he appeared to be just making sure that he was very clear in what he was saying. And there's going to be this is a replay, by the way. This is actually the satellite coordinates for the feed itself, but they are playing it back a second time for news stations that missed it the first time. This is just.
And his attorney sort of smiled at the courtroom when she came in. He looks about the same, doesn't he, to you? Does he look the same that he did?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Does he look the same that he did? He does to me.
Oh, yeah. Kohberger.
Yeah.
No, he looks very, very similar. Here he is rising for Judge John Judge. Our comment section was lighting up about Judge. And people that have watched me before know that the very last thing I ever do is ignore people in the comment section and their observations. And as far as the pronunciation of the names, our comment section was lighting up about the but I wrote down one note. Brian Enton did such a great job on Twitter as far as documenting what transpired, that it was very easy for us to follow along. But I did document one thing here in my notes, and Judge stopped at one point and said, sorry, this is hard. Did you catch that?
Yeah.
He stopped as he was reading the names of the victims, and he just said,
"It is hard.
Sorry,
Absolutely,
this is hard."
because they're not just names; they are people, and the way their life ended is just not supposed to happen. And I don't know the judge. I'm going to presume that he's a father, and I know in those cases with us, I'm sure I know you're not a father yet, but you think of your kids. That's what you think about. You think of your own kids. People might think, we don't put our opinions in the story, but I'm sorry. A story like this captivates people because we think of our own families. And I don't blame the judge for showing that bit of emotion, that it was hard.
Apologies
but it
for
was
that
hard.
transition there. That was the wrong transition. But that is a look at Judge John Judge. Oh, this is now a second camera angle that we're getting. So they're feeding back
now
multiple angles, and now we're seeing the judge. Because
can you play the audio on this? Maybe
I can. Yeah, I can bring this up.
Except there isn't.
That's awesome. I love.
Maybe sometimes they'll feed the second one without audio. That's too bad.
The second without audio.
That's too bad.
So then they're going to sync it up later. I
guess. Would have been nice to see the pause when he said, "This is hard."
Let me hold on. Let me try one more feed. Let me make sure. Let me just try some wizardry here for a second and see if
while he was doing it, because it disappeared like
any audio from from
my perspective.
So they're feeding back the second camera angle without audio. So yes, that moment where Judge, and people will be able to sync this up later, but the moment where he said, "I'm sorry, this is hard." Let's not forget. And Jennifer, I know you're standing by. We'll bring you in here in just a second. In fact, let's pop you on screen now. Let's not forget what he's looking at. In front of him, he's looking at the suspect alongside the defense attorney, Ann Taylor. He's looking at prosecutors, and then behind him, and in a packed courtroom, and most of the folks in attendance are family members. And as the names are being read, there's no doubt going to be an outpouring of emotion. So Judge might have gotten caught up in the moment there. And look, I'm just going to say this. I know that there's a lot of chatter online and a lot of chatter in our comment section about the mispronunciation of a couple of the names there. This is his first time in the courtroom for this particular case. Let's not forget this has been elevated now to district court. So this is the first time he said, "I'm going to be the one presiding over the case," but this is the first time that he has been, as I understand it, in the courtroom with Brian Kohberger and this case. And also, too, if he was getting emotional, if he was getting caught up in this, I wonder if people are going to be dissecting that element. I know that, I'm thinking of Peter Tragos, Emily Baker, some of the great lawyers online that dissect every little development, big, small, tiny, in a courtroom and try to make sense of it. But whether or not him pausing and mispronouncing the names tells us anything about where this goes from here. Jennifer, let's bring you in. What did you make of Brian Kohberger's arraignment, having watched it for the first time?
Well, I think the interesting thing is to contrast it with the other time we saw him in court, where he says not guilty, and where he, enters his plea, and where before that, at least according to his attorney, he said he is going to prove his innocence. Or exonerate himself, I think, for the word. So I just find it a bit of a contrast, this move he made, not to say the word.
Yeah, standing silent, as Walt noted, was an option for Brian Kohberger, and he chose that particular option. I want to read people who are looking for the lawyer, Peter Tragos. He tried to get on stream. He said that he had some mind-blowing technical difficulties. He offers his apologies, but I said, "Hey man, text me some notes and I'll read kind of what you have to say." And this is from Peter, the lawyer, he'll be live later. He says, October trial date indicates he's not waiving speedy trial at this point. Standing silent is effectively the same thing as entering a not guilty plea, but things can be read into that. And then 60 days to notify for the death penalty. And I expect Peter Tragos expects, again, this is his analysis, expects the state to go for the death penalty. And so that notice has to be served within 60 days, that is in fact their intent. And I just want to read, just say this one thing before we go into some of the comments here. As we look here at some of the secondary camera angles, looks like the pool camera operator is zooming in on something here. I just really want to point out that if Judge was emotional in reading the names, people might read something into that. But people are human. They make mistakes. I've mispronounced names on live stream, and I feel terrible when I do it. I feel absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
And he might go back to his office now, his chambers, and get just mountains of hate mail saying, how dare you mispronounce some of these names. But people are human. Please remember that. Mistakes happen, and it's not meant with any disrespect. It likely, in all likelihood, it was just human error, and that can happen. And I know that might have been, look, it's the family members in the courtroom. Maybe they'll be asked as to whether or not that was upsetting to them, but mistakes happen in courtrooms all the time. And so if maybe he was emotionally caught up in the moment.
Mispronunciations of names happen in courtrooms all the time.
Oh, frequently.
We will go into a hearing and think we have the pronunciation correct. A judge says it differently. A prosecutor says it differently. Then we're forced to call whoever we can call and say which is the correct way. So yeah, it does happen. I get how people would be upset about it, but yeah, you're right. The judge is human.
As we're looking in here on a zoomed in shot, no shaving cuts of note, no look, I'll let our audience, if there's any observations that people want to make as to Bryan Kohberger's appearance, his demeanor, his mannerisms. This is now, we're officially opening up, starting now. Hashtag HJB, hashtag HWalt, hashtag HJennifer. We're just going to spend the next few minutes going through, really maybe even more than the next few minutes, going over as many of your social media comments as possible, because we want to interactively talk with you here, answer your questions about where this goes from here. What we want to do as well is garner your reaction. And let's not forget, folks, that that's probably started right around now. I think is it the gag order, Jennifer? The motion on the gag order is happening as we speak?
Yes, should be.
And let's see if Brian Enton is back in court. I'll just kind of refresh this really quickly. He has not indicated as such. He might have indicated as much on News Nation. Let's go to the comments. We're going to really focus in on YouTube Live. We'll bounce to TikTok and maybe Twitter as well. But let's go to, this is what I'm talking about, some of the micro observations. Caitlin says he was swallowing and clenching a lot.
People I have a tweet, somebody tweeted at me, and I you noticed it too on the tight shot. By the way, this type of stuff, I don't know. It's a little bit too much for me sometimes, but because, but I get it. But on the tight shot, and you did notice his jaw popped a little bit, and this person wrote, will anyone, no, she wrote, I noticed he was clenching his jaw. I don't know what that means. Perhaps Jennifer knows what that means from a profiling point of view. I don't know what that means.
I mean, I don't think we can make too much of really any of it because we haven't watched him before. Maybe he uses his jaw a lot. So I don't think we can make too much of it. Of course, everybody's going to be dissecting his demeanor. I think you hit it on the head. Well, he's certainly confident. And again, I 100% believe that was a control.
Ageless beauty.
Jennifer, and on that point, when you say a control thing, what do you mean by that? I think I know what you mean, but what do you mean by the control, by not saying not guilty or guilty?
Not saying not guilty. There isn't anyone that's going to force him into stating anything at this point. Yes, he has to acknowledge yes, no, when he's asked a direct question, but he wasn't going to make those statements. He was going to let the judge make it for him. Does that
go with anything else? Do you think? Does that mean anything bigger than that as far as control of a, because murder in many ways is about control. Is that something we would look at as well or compare it to, or no?
That's how I see it. I see him being controlling in every aspect that I've seen. When I've seen him on the videos, you know, remember when he got pulled over at one of the car stops, his father tries to answer a question of the officer, and he puts his hand, you know, and says, "Dad, you don't know." That was very telling to me. I mean, where he's even trying to manipulate his father and his responses, and that's supposed to be somebody who's in authority.
Right.
I also find it interesting, you know, could this mean there is a plea in the future? That's the only other thing I could see. But in, you know, really, it was the same outcome, and he knew it would be the same outcome whether he said something or whether he didn't. In other words, whether he said not guilty or didn't.
Yeah, that's what Mandy is saying here is wondering, is there a power play behind not saying the words not guilty? I think is what that is meant to say. And so people are going to read into this, but semantics, if we just focus on semantics for a second, it's a not guilty plea one way or the other. Maybe he didn't want to say the words not guilty, or maybe he was advised by counsel to not say the words not guilty. Let's not forget that as well.
It reminds me of the no contest plea, because a no contest plea is you're still guilty. And the judge will tell you that after you plead nolo, you're still guilty. And I've always wondered, why do you plead nolo? I'm sure there's a legal way. I think it's been described to me before, but it's sort of like yeah, sure, I made a plea deal. I'm guilty, but you know what? I'm saying no contest instead. Well, you're still guilty, and you're still convicted. So I wonder if you're right. Maybe it is something his lawyer told him not to say.
Reese Baum says #KJB longer hair. That's it. And to tell you the truth, Reese Baum, I thought I was thinking the same thing. Maybe his hair is a little bit longer, and that's just him being a little bit longer between haircuts. We've seen inmates who have emerged after solitary confinement after a long period of time. We've seen people who have completely shaved heads or a dramatically different appearance or weight loss, and we've seen different physical transformations when it comes to inmates over a longer period of time behind bars. And Brian Kohberger, for the most part, appearance-wise, relatively consistent to what we saw in January. So we were highlighting some of the observations as well. Somebody asked, and it was on screen for a moment, whether or not Brian Kohberger's parents or family members were there. It did not appear that they were there. Let's go to Kimmy Warfield. Hashtags all around for all of us. Will this trial be live streamed, or will we have to wait like we did today? I want to bring this up really quickly. I know there's more important questions, but I know that this one people want to know the answer to. And if Idaho court policy remains the same, and we know that the gag order hearing is taking place right now as we look here at a closer shot of Judge John Judge. He might be now reading the names, by the way. Or no, he's not speaking at all at the moment. He's looking at his calendar, I think. #KJB, Jennifer Wall, will the trial be live streamed, or will we have to wait like we did today? The answer to this is based on Idaho court policy. You can't live stream out of the courtroom. And people were like, oh, so you mean today was the 30-minute delay and we'll be able to watch it on a 30-minute delay in October? No, that's not how this works. Based on our understanding of Idaho court policy, that particular hearing, or each individual court event, if you will, cannot be distributed until that hearing has concluded. So if I'm reading into this correctly, that would mean that either the entire day's events can be streamed and distributed after 5 o'clock, after they adjourn for the day, or maybe, and us in the media, we have to do our part in asking these questions. Right. But will the judge allow us on lunch break to transmit the first half of the day, and then after the court is adjourned for the day, then transmit the second half of the day?
There are courts that will not allow you to take things, quote unquote, out of context. And if that's the case, they may very well want it all to be distributed at once, as opposed to bits and pieces getting out. I don't know, but I've definitely experienced that before in other jurisdictions. And maybe the law will change. Maybe there'll be a demand in Idaho. They did just change. I don't know, ironically, or they just change. They just authorized the firing squad in Idaho.
Reason being is because there have been holdups in several states regarding the chemicals, the means necessary to do lethal injection that there has been.
So I'm just pulling up Brian Enton's Twitter, and you know what? I'm going to go ahead and share that. Let's share that. And he said that the hearing related to Brian Kohberger's gag order is about to start. So I guess they are doing it like on the hour. That was 6 minutes ago. And the scheduling conference related to the gag order was supposed to be at at 10 o'clock, which it's 1 o'clock Eastern time. It was supposed to be at 10 a.m. Pacific. So it says it's about to start. Then Brian Entin also said he can't stop thinking about Olivia's baby in court, the message it sent. And then this, let's see here. Do that from the beginning. This is where I thought he looked really meek walking in. This part right here. You know, looking down. I mean, he might have shackles on his feet. He clenched his jaw just a minute ago, or a second ago. He smiled at Ann Taylor as she pulled out his chair. Right here. Like a thank you smile. Other than that, he looks meek and uncomfortable. But while he was answering the questions, he looked pretty on point. So until he stood silent. Okay, so let me go back and share.
I'd like to thank everyone for continuing to follow this case and keep the memories of Kaylee, Maddie, Thana, and Ethan alive.
What was that about?
They are what is important. Not, but he's gonna share his observations in addition to stating the fact of record. But a statement from Kaylee Gonzalez's family just coming in and coming into Brian Entin's Twitter, and I'll read it as, quote, "The family would like to thank everyone for continuing to follow this case and keep the memories of Kaylee, Maddie, Thana, and Ethan alive. They are what is important, not the defendant. We are thankful that the Latah County District Attorney's Office finally took the case to a grand jury and came back with an indictment. At the same time, we are disappointed that the judicial process has not been more efficient in addressing the gag order. This is just the beginning of a long journey for all the families, and we are thankful for your continued support and coverage." The Gonzalez family,
unless you've been in their shoes, know how he would act. And, you know, I have a lot of empathy for this family. Their daughter, Kaylee, strikes a chord with me. I think I have a daughter who is much like her. And I can really relate to the anger and frustration that they've likely felt through this process. And I know they want to speak. But from my view as a former agent, I think this really helps the case from the prosecution standpoint as well. I think it's fair to the defendant. And I really do think this is the best answer, but it's the hardest answer for the victims.
I'm looking here for any updates whatsoever, folks, on the gag order. And I'm looking here if any of those motions now, because the time is now 1:18 Eastern. That makes it 10 a.m. Pacific time, and that would put us at the second of the two hearings. If especially to our YouTube moderators, our great YouTube moderators who help me out a lot, if anybody sees any updates regarding the gag order, I believe, and Jennifer, I do have that right? The gag order was second, and the motion to compel for evidence was third, correct?
That's right, but this could take a while. And also the judge could decide to issue an opinion later. I've seen that many times. So we'll see if he does an opinion right on the spot or whether he decides to give a written opinion at a later time. But I think he's going to uphold it.
Let's
So it's interesting because a lot of things have kind of like, there's little surprises here. Like we thought it was going to be a back-to-back-to-back. Clearly it wasn't because they started right after 10 a.m. their time. So it didn't go back-to-back. And then he stood still, which is not what I mean, certainly that's an option, but I didn't expect that to happen. So I think it's been really interesting to see, you know, some things kind of go as expected and some things not go as expected.
At the lower level court will be unsuccessful, but what will the Idaho Supreme Court say upon?
Let me back that up.
I've seen that many times. So we'll a written.
Let's go back to folks. I want to kind of go as rapid fire as I can through some of these comments. Yeah. So Queen is saying, Queen of the Amazon finds. Look at that. That's a great username. You know, hey man, we all need to find those treasures on Amazon. #HeyJB. What about the gag order? Any chance that gets lifted soon? We experts like Jennifer and others have repeated that they think it is more likely that the gag order stays in effect, and the challenge at the lower level court will be unsuccessful. But what will the Idaho Supreme Court say upon them actually properly receiving that challenge from the media coalition behind those who are against the gag order? That's gonna be really interesting. And so we'll be following that closely because that does change the dynamic of the case as far as public consumption. And I want to know exactly where that goes. I think you know where Walt and I stand on. I'm sure Jennifer is the same. Jennifer, I know you were working for the FBI, and now you're here on the media side of things. But we are all for transparency. We want it all to come out there, and the gag order, of course, makes it difficult for us in the media. Do you have anything really quickly on the gag order, being a retired FBI agent and now somebody who appears on national television?
Just really quickly, I want them to keep it in place. I think it helps both parties. I think it makes it fair to the defense and fair to the prosecution. I think it's best not to have the jury pool even more tainted. And so I think it's the best call. So I guess I'm still leaning on FBI.
Yeah, you're staying loyal there.
The FBI doesn't even need gag orders. They just are gagged. We can either confirm or deny, correct?
That's right. I remember I had never spoken ever. And in fact, there was an award you got. It was called the Red Shoe Award for putting your foot in your mouth. If you ever spoke to the media, you would be in trouble with the higher ups, with your boss, and so on and so forth.
I've always thought, though, in the hands of an unethical reporter, I could call the FBI about anything. I could call the FBI about JB and say, hey, is it true that JB did this, this, and this? And if you get the wrong agent and they say we can neither confirm nor deny, I now can imply that the FBI. But I would say this, and unlike perhaps my journalism friends, I get why a gag order is needed in many cases. I may object to it because I want information for our viewers, but I get that a case like this with as much media that would be involved and unprofessional media.
But you can say that about any case.
Well,
this isn't any case.
This is for
any high-profile case.
Report
and predictions and the process, but I always found it to be quite interesting that there's very little uniformity across multiple states, multiple jurisdictions about how do we protect the integrity of the process, but also follow constitutional law and make sure that freedom of speech, freedom of press isn't violated.
But you're also a defendant also has a right to a fair trial, and that can be violated. I would have to argue of the two, even though I'm a journalist, the right to a fair trial is far more important than our right to information.
And that's why I find it interesting that does law have to catch up with the times and the technological ability now for people around the world. We have people that are joining us on YouTube right now that are joining us from quite literally multiple continents, and people that can consume information in real time and vocalize their opinions and thoughts and observations and feedback on the legal process all in real time. That's never been that was never possible ever before in human history, that in real time you can follow someone's legal fate.
This is a
you can
great
follow
point.
the fate of Brian Kohberger.
And another
Actually,
reason
in
why
Idaho,
the
you
gag
can't
order is
because
in place.
you can't stream the video. But I mean,
one of the reasons, I mean, as a media person by trade, I want more access and transparency. But at the same time, I understand the reason for the gag order taints the jury pool if more people have this access to information. Now, the good news is that there's always people who don't follow the news, and there's always people who don't care. And a lot of times they're the ones who end up maybe who don't have very strong opinions either way, who end up on the juries, and they can then have unbiased views and opinions going into a trial. It'd be interesting to have really, really strongly opinionated true crime people in a court, in a jury.
If this case, just like Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, you could follow every time that something happened in the courtroom. It wasn't just the people in the courtroom that were reacting to it. It was everybody around the world that were watching it in real time. So perhaps there needs to be more of a conversation in this country about how the legal process in high profile cases especially is protected, but also that constitutional law isn't violated when it comes to us being reporters, the media having access to what is happening so that we can document history. All right, that's enough of that. I promise. Let's go back to some of the comments.
That's a really good point. I almost feel that if anything in Idaho, it would make more sense to have the gag order before they have the jury pool is selected, before a jury pool is selected. And then after that, then kind of allow it to, vacate the non-dissemination order, and then have the because the jury should not be watching any media coverage, so they can stream the court proceedings thereafter. So if anything, it's interesting that Idaho has this issue about not streaming live the court proceedings. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
That are coming in, and somebody, okay, so Brian Enton is tweeting, according to a lot of people that are messaging me in all caps, and says that Brian Kohberger is back in court right now for the gag order hearing. So he has elected to appear. Now, as we understand it, there might have been the option for him to waive his right to appear. But Jennifer, this was just my 2 cents on this earlier. Given his background, given his, given his education, him being, there's very little surprise here about him wanting to be involved in the process, and also not being in a rush to get back to the same solitary confinement cell that he has been in for the last 5 months, correct?
He is going to be an integral part of his defense. He is tearing through those terabytes right now. Well, maybe not this moment, but that's what he's doing in his cell, and he's not going to miss 1 minute of these hearings.
So he's back in court for now the gag order. Now, if you're Brian Kohberger and you're hearing about this gag, what does Brian Kohberger think of the gag order?
I would bet he doesn't like the gag order. I don't know.
Oh, I think he wants it.
Maybe he does.
You think he wants it, Jennifer?
I think he does. I think he wants it. Right. He's going to want all the fame, and he's getting the fame because his name is out there every single day, every single hour. But he doesn't want all this evidence that they have out. I'm very convinced of that.
When I said he would like it, I was thinking the same thing about wanting the fame. Of course, that would be
he's gonna have fame regardless, right?
But if he is who we might
fame,
think he
fame
is,
isn't the right word.
Infamy
is the better word.
If he wants, but of course he would. I mean, if he is who some suspect he is, for him, it's fame. It's not infamy.
Right.
But I just wonder if, well, I don't know. Jennifer's probably right. And if he's a criminal, he was studying criminology. He definitely would want the gag order if he's studying criminology, because he would understand the danger of information getting out, partial information getting out, information getting interpreted, information corrupting a potential jury pool.
Isn't the
right? Because right now what we're having is news sources like News Nation, or actually news media like News Nation, using anonymous sources to kind of have these leaks of information. So that wouldn't happen. I mean, actually, it would probably still happen, but because most of the time, even if there wasn't a gag order, the police, like Jennifer Koffendorfer said, isn't supposed to answer questions like this, other than information that's made publicly available in legal documents.
The more access the media has to the process, and the more interviews that take place, and the more prodding that exists, is there a thought behind there's more of a chance for some sort of mishap to occur that jeopardizes the legal process? And that's behind also Brian Kohberger's analysis of the gag order, Jennifer?
Well, anytime you put witnesses up where they can be interviewed by the media, there is such a huge issue with them giving a statement, and then they would have given a statement previously to law enforcement, and then they gave a statement in the grand jury, and now they're going to give a statement on the stand. So from a prosecution standpoint, it's horrible, because you know how it is in the media. I mean, you make one miscue with a word and it's, a big deal. Can you imagine in court if they just misstated something or corrected it? It's a very difficult situation. So that's what the prosecution is looking at avoiding.
Very interesting. I want to go to this comment from Lissy saying #KJB. I, as a lawyer, would also appear. So understandable he does that as a criminology student. Yeah, there's very little surprise to me, and that he wants to be involved in his own defense. He wants to be involved in the process. He doesn't want to be in the...
Well, I think you make a great point, though. I mean, he also probably, well, we don't know anything about him. We don't know enough about him. Maybe he likes to be alone, but you make a great point. What's the option? Going back to my solitary confinement, or at least being in a room with people where I'm the center of attention? And maybe if we're interpreting his personality correctly, he wants to be the center of attention.
Just some different oxygen, being in a different
jail
room.
Smell, I can tell you, jail smell. The one thing about jails that you can't, I mean, they smell, and I'm not saying,
I don't mean to laugh. It's just because if you've ever been to a correctional facility, they're all unique, but I know what you're getting.
There's an odor, and it's bad food and humanity. I hate to say it, but
it's not fun.
It's not, and they're dark and they're dim, and I've always thought solitary confinement would be better than medium security when you're in a room with a bunch of other people that you don't necessarily know or trust. But yeah, why would he? I mean, he would definitely, if you have a choice between going back to solitary or any
sitting
jail,
sitting
in a courtroom that is clean and
just different. How about
different?
A different change of scenery.
That's right.
Let's go to Nadia says, hashtags all around. Why did the charge say kill and murder? Is there a legal difference? That's just terminology per the state, right? I mean,
murder is a charge.
Jennifer?
Kill, but yeah, I don't know. I think I've heard that before. There's no charge.
That's going to be their boilerplate.
Yeah, that's probably what they say.
Particular charges.
Okay, let's go to some more comments and questions that are coming in, and let's continue to follow Brian Enton on Twitter and make sure that we're not missing anything.
I love that Brian Enton is like the Nate from East Idaho News in the Lori Vallow case. Brian Enton is now doing the play-by-play. I love it.
One comment while you're looking at those, I just think both sides, no matter what the audience, what everybody is thinking right now, there's nothing more important than the judicial process being followed appropriately, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Because no one wants this case to not see justice or to be overturned on appeal, no matter who wins. It's just we want the process to be fair. If the fight isn't fair, if the process isn't fair, it's not a good thing.
That's right.
Yeah,
No doubt
all
about
protecting the process. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, and making sure that.
But in a case like this, with as much media, the skilled media, international media, who know how to cultivate sources, there will be leaks no matter what.
There already have been.
All right. And there will be plenty of leaks. And because it's not just the Idaho, Boise, I think they have one TV market in Idaho. I don't remember what size it is, but it's a sort of beginner's TV market, if I recall.
Like Boise?
Boise, yeah.
Yeah.
Good, great city, by the way.
Yeah.
I've heard. But my point is, you're now going to have these journalists who are the Brian Entons of the world that are, and others, who have and producers we don't even know who their names are. And they know how international, and they know how to push for leaks.
Yeah.
And so there will be leaks, whether you have a gag order or not. And those leaks could theoretically be damaging, but they will definitely provide information that I know people are looking forward to hearing about this case.
I'll just say, sources say has just
don't like it.
Right. I mean, you and I are in that same.
I've always used sources. I've said sources say, but as a last resort, I've known people who said a source tells me. That is what?
Yeah, no,
really. But I think the source should be used as a tool to work on people like Jennifer, maybe not Jennifer because it's the FBI, but to let maybe somebody, to get somebody on the record, but that has long gone away. And
Jennifer, if I had come to you 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and tried to talk you into being a source on a high profile case, your reaction would be what? I'm putting you on the spot.
No. Not in a million years. Not in a million years.
Jennifer, what if we had a great conversation and we had our similar views, about the world, and,
no way, man.
And we had so much. Okay,
no way.
Maybe you and I are, we have friends common. Nope. See that the FBI is
no way. But I do want to say this,
ironclad
for the media individual. I just get to provide analysis of the information given, right? No matter whether it came from a source, I'm strictly just analyzing the information before me, right? But if you're in the media and you have a source tell you something, aren't you obligated to report that? And I don't know, because I'm really not in the media per se. So
no, if a source came to me with information, my first instinct as a journalist is to vet it, is to try to, and as to your point, Walt, go for a second source.
Well, and you go for you could go to a law enforcement agency and say, look, here's what I'm told. And, part of it is psychological in a way. How do they react? Are they stone-faced like we think Jennifer would have been? Or like an FBI agent would have been? I mean, I've known FBI agents to talk a little bit, but nothing on record.
You've had more luck.
Nothing on record.
I've never had a federal agent. I've made friends with a lot of cops. I've made friends with a lot of state troopers, state police. I've never a source in the handful of times where I've said sources say. I'm just going to say, I don't think it's ever been an FBI agent. I have a better chance making one of my cats come to life and talk with me at home than I do a federal agent.
On Jennifer's question,
I do.
There's no obligation for us to use what the sources say. No. And in fact, our organization, Nexstar, frowns on the use of sources. And there's certain things that are required when here's what sources tell me. And it would depend on is the story. Is it such an important story we are warning people about something? Like that would be a way that you would go, okay, I can see using it then.
You weigh every little, I think, I don't know about you, the amount of times that I have used sources in my reporting, I could probably count them on one hand in my whole career.
I would say the same.
And it's only like the circumstances just have to be aligned in a certain way where you are doing it for the greater good.
It is the easier way to do it. And it's the faster way to do it. On a Monday, I get a source and I go on and I say, a source tells me, blah, please, no. So now that's the lazy way to go. Now on Tuesday, I get a second source. Now I got sources. The lazy thing to do, or the aggressive thing to do, you might say, I think, is to say sources say, but I'm trying to beat the competition. I got to beat the competition. The competitive nature of what we do is huge.
Because that source could be talking to other media outlets.
That's right. And you've got a scoop. You've got a scoop. But the better thing to do is to use the sources and go to the horse's mouth, if you will, and say, here's what I know. Can you verify it? Here's what I know. I'm not going to tell you how I got it. Can you verify it?
The reason we're having an extended conversation about this, folks, is because this might be the reality for the next, 5 months, 4 to 5 months, because if the gag order remains in effect and is upheld at multiple levels of the Idaho court system, then the only way that we're going to be getting information directly from law enforcement or prosecutors or anybody involved really in the process now legally is going to be through sources say, or a source says, and that might be the prism in which we are viewing information and receiving information.
It will definitely happen with this case. There's no doubt.
Yeah, and already has. So we're paying. Yeah, Jennifer.
Can I ask one quick question? Sorry, because I never looked at it as you're saying it. In other words, if you believed what a person came to you and said, you had no equivocation, isn't it your duty to report that? And maybe it's just my ignorance of understanding the process. If you 100% believe that, and you are charged with presenting known facts that you believe to the public, just help me with this.
Because
I don't know that a source, these aren't, look, for us.
It's an excellent question, though.
For us, though, look, I got to be honest with you. I'm never 100% sure about anything in many ways, because anything can happen. You know, we can get close to it, but the point would be, if it's a source and that doesn't want to be identified, they could be making something up. So I wouldn't consider anything a source tells me is necessarily fact. I want something from the source that makes me believe it is a fact. And as far as the responsibility to report it, I would again go back to, are the sources telling me that a water supply is poisoned? That's the public good. That's important. Are the sources telling me, I'm working on a case today about a murder suspect on the run who's just a long trail of trouble. Are the sources telling me where this guy is? And do I have multiple sources telling me that? My first step would be take those sources to the law enforcement, the U.S. Marshal who are looking for him. But beyond that, if it's a basic case like this, where it's I hate to say it, but I don't want to call it entertainment.
The case now.
I don't want to call it entertainment, but it is, we are interested in this case. There's an intrigue. Is what my source is telling me going to is it worth harming the case?
Jennifer, to answer your question, if a source comes to me with information, I'm not going to be used as a megaphone to just repeat that information like a squawk box. I'm not just gonna continue, not gonna just relay that. Our jobs as reporters is then to get more, use that as a launching point to receive more information, and also to make sure that this person is telling us the truth, and also not just a part of the truth. Sometimes people might come to you with information and tell you, 30% of the reality of the situation. And then it's really, if you just then announce that on Twitter, then you're not doing your job as a reporter to then dig into what's, the other connecting tissue really of what that information means for the public.
A friend of mine, the late Jack White, who won a Pulitzer Prize. He was a journalist for the Providence Journal in the early 70s. His story is why, the use of his story is why, and I believe he used sources in that story. Not to question Jack White at all, but he won a Pulitzer because his story was used by national reporters to ask Richard Nixon about his income taxes. And this is why Richard Nixon uttered the words, "I am not a crook." It was because of Jack's story. But But you know, sources in that case were a different thing. But in other cases, I think, you know, I don't know.
It's an interesting conversation, one that we could probably have for a long time. But
my point, sorry,
yes.
I forgot what I was, you know.
I get it. I do this streaming stuff a lot. So, I get it.
Jack said, and he's not the first to say it, get it first, but get it right. And it really should be get it right, but get it first. Because yes, we want to be first, and it's way more competitive now than it's been ever. News Nation, for example, still a relatively new entity, but pushing out there to get answers and get them first. No doubt about it. But there's more media, and there's unprofessional media that I'm sure say source tells me, and that's out there too. So and let's not pretend the professional media doesn't compete with the unprofessional media. For somebody who just is out there to get clicks, because we do. We look at it and we'll say, I got to verify that. I got to verify that.
And this is why so much information will surface on Reddit, some of it true, some of it untrue, but like you'll get a whisper of an allegation, and then the responsible journalists, responsible reporters, upon receiving that tidbit, will then work to confirm it or work to garner its authenticity. And so we have a process here as far as receiving information. Walt and I, we try to, and others in our newsroom here at WFLA, we work on maintaining our standards all the time and ask the tough questions. But Jennifer, I appreciate you asking.
That's a great question.
Because
it's a nice question.
It's a question too. Now that is so. This case is almost a microcosm for how we go about. What are the ethics? Where are the standards? Where is the line when it comes to receiving information from sources, and how you vet and then report that information if you do choose to report it at all? So there's a lot of minutia here that goes into the weeds as to how we go about our business. But I appreciate the conversation. Let's go back and just make sure I haven't missed anything coming up for air here for a second after our talk about journalism ethics and the use of sources. Brian Enton tweeting out 5 minutes ago, the Goncalves family attorney wants the gag order issues resolved quickly, asking the judge to address it this week. The judge says because the media coalition went to the Supreme Court, it has slowed the process down. Interesting. So the judge is saying that the media coalition's decision to go to the highest court in Idaho has complicated and slowed the process down. I find that to be...
Isn't Idaho one of our reddest states? I believe it is. I just looked it up. It's a very conservative state. I'm not saying, and I just would say that theoretically, and I don't know if the judges there are elected as they are in Florida or appointed. If they're appointed, I mean, a conservative judge is going to take, I think, that approach for release of information. I've had judges who would let us in the courtroom but not record the audio because they did not want anything taken out of context. They were expecting, okay, you've got to put the whole testimony, which we can't do in a story that's a minute and a half. And I kind of get that. I get that because out of context can be out of context, and it can slant a case either way. But so that sounds like a conservative view of it, but it could very well have slowed down the process.
But I know Jennifer is just thinking, just protect the process, right, Jennifer?
No, what I'm chomping at the bit about is that the media.
I think Jennifer, if you can hear us, you froze up a bit on the Zoom call. Hopefully it'll unfreeze here in just a second. It's always when they blink. It's always when they blink too. So now
it was also at a very like a cliffhanger point of view. Like she said, the media.
Yeah, she was setting
like
it
the
up.
next sentence would have revealed what she was going to say.
Jennifer, if you can hear us still, it appears we've lost you on the Zoom call. You're frozen. I'm still looking at you here on my multi-view. So we'll try to get you back here in a moment. But we'll go to M's comment here. Let's bring up here. Let's go here to me and Walt. Bring up the comment. M says, hashtag AJB, exactly. A source should be a starting point, not the whole story.
That's right.
Love hearing how others in the media deal with these things. But to your point,
it's so competitive.
It's so competitive, but at the same time, not everyone has the same standards.
No, there's standards. No doubt. And you know, people may not realize this, but so we know a guy that's a national correspondent like Brian has gone up through the ranks and worked in markets. And the way it works, you work in market A, which is a smaller market, maybe a Boise, Idaho. I don't know if that's a starting market, but the smallest market is Glendive, Montana. It's 2010, 210. There's 210 markets. There are journalists, TV journalists and print journalists who will start with a small paper and maybe stay there their whole life, which I think is awesome. The money's not going to be very good in those places because the commercials aren't as expensive. But I think it's awesome when somebody stays in a place and reports in the place they know. However, the people who want to move up will sometimes be a little overly aggressive on
overzealous.
They need a scoop. I need a scoop. I got to put a scoop on my reel, or I need a scoop in my newspaper, in my clippings. And I think so that that's one form of competitiveness. But then you get into the bigger markets, and all of the networks want to break something on this story. And there's, it's all about, I hate it, but it's all about money, right? You want to scoop because you're going to get viewers, eyeballs, and that's money, and that drives it. And I think that drives the overly aggressive reporter to go, a source tells me. No.
But to your point, we've talked a lot about this. I know Jennifer has unfrozen, so we're going to come back to her in a second to finish her point. But really quickly, this is why you and I have that same uncomfortable reaction when you read a piece of work and it's entirely built on sources say, or
but you read it, but you read it.
Yeah, but as a reporter, I shift a little bit, and because man, you're putting a lot of faith and a lot of confidence in your sources, and really it's in a way going all in at the poker table, because if your source is wrong, or your source has manipulated you, or your source has an agenda, or if your information is incorrect, or it's only telling a part of the story,
that's right. You're taking something out of context.
You're jeopardizing your
career.
So
yes, and I'll tell you, I think in this world where our former president, in my opinion, and I don't have a dog in the fight, I really don't. But when our former president, in my opinion, misused the word fake news over and over, to the point where now the national people across the country use fake news as to opine on a story they don't agree with, or they use fake news maybe to opine on a story that is all source based. Well, that fuels that, and it because fake news, what fake news really means, it is fake. It is a completely fabricated story, and stories that the former President Trump said were fake news, they weren't completely fabricated. He just necessarily didn't agree with it. So because of that, I think it's important, more important than ever, that we verify somehow on the record.
Yeah. And I've talked about on stream in the past about how the public in a lot of different ways has lost, that there has been the trust that exists between the public and the media at large has endured. It's been fractured in a way, but I hope that people remember that there's different section. Just calling it the media or just calling it the news, like there's so many different sections of the media, so many different sections of the news industry. And some of it goes up to what people would refer to as mainstream media, all the way down to the local journalists pounding the pavement on the ground. And so everyone try to remember to have a open mind when it comes to how different organizations represent different ideals when it comes to how news should be reported and presented as fact. Let's 100%. Go back to Jennifer Coffindaffer. Jennifer, are you back?
Yes. You know what happened? We're having this amazing, horrible lightning and thunderstorm. It shook my building, that piece of thunder, and it, I guess, froze the Wi-Fi. But anyway, just one quick point before I head off to some other obligations. I just wanted to say the media made a terrible mistake skipping the district judge. And that is a big point that I think is partially
say that again. It did what to the district judge? I just want to make sure I heard you correctly.
They skipped him.
Oh yeah.
You can't go and ask the president without asking the vice president. They made a crucial error, basically saying we don't really care about what this district court judge says. So you've got the layers. It was the magistrate judge, then the district judge, and then the judge above that. And instead of going the right sequence, they jumped him. And that is seen, I can tell you, as disrespectful.
And I think that was in all likelihood done to expedite the process, saying, look, it's going to, I guess if you're the Media Coalition attorney, you're of the mindset that this is going to go to Idaho Supreme Court eventually. It's going to be challenged at that level of the state eventually. Let's just can we just get this along and move this along?
Hi everyone. So just a quick reintroduction. We're talking about Brian Kohberger, the person accused of killing the 4 University of Idaho students, and he's been arraigned this morning at 9 a.m. Idaho time, which was Pacific. There is a scheduling conference happening now on the gag order. And just to reiterate what Brian Enton, who's there, and he's kind of doing live play-by-play, he said that the judge says because the Media Coalition, actually, I'm just going to go ahead and share that so that you can read along with me. Judge says that because the Media Coalition went to the Supreme Court, it has slowed the process down. The Gonzalez family attorney wants the gag order issues resolved quickly, asking the judge to address this week. And then he says, the judge says that the AP Media Coalition needs to tone down their challenge to the gag order. There are 2 different issues happening in court right now with the Kohberger gag order. The Gonzalez attorney wants clarity so he can speak on behalf of his clients. And the Media Coalition is fighting for more public information, less strict gag order. And so just to reiterate here, the Gonzalez family can speak. So the gag order does not restrict the Gonzalez family from speaking. What it does restrict is the Gonzalez attorney from speaking. And so that's the thing that the Gonzalez family wants to avoid is that. Judge is not making any decisions today on the Kohberger gag order. The hearing's set for June 9th to address it. Okay, cool. So June 9th, court hearing. Also a June 27th to address cameras in court. June 27th, cameras in court. Okay, that's cool. So maybe they'll bypass the judge, the Idaho ruling about court not being recorded or live streamed. So June 9th will be the gag order. Address it. Okay, great. Now let's go back to JB.
Long and just get to the highest court in the state possible. But that's not really, in Jennifer's opinion and others, that's not exactly how the process works.
She's right. I would have to agree with her.
Jennifer, before we lose you to a lightning storm and an internet outage, I want to just give you the floor is yours. We're going to continue to take everyone's questions here out of the YouTube live comment section, Twitter, TikTok as well. But the floor is yours before we say farewell.
I just wanted to say thank you for having me on. Well, it's always great to be here with you. I'm sorry we missed Mr. Tragos and Mr. Inton, my buddy. But your audience is always just one of the best. It's amazing. I always look back at their questions and their comments. They're great. Thank you for having me.
Jennifer,
thanks, Jennifer.
You're always welcome here on WFLA Now. We really appreciate you.
It's always great to hear actual words from an FBI agent.
Yeah.
Other than
you beat me to it.
I can neither confirm
nor deny.
Which I remember I remember the first time I heard that as a young television reporter in Marshall, Texas, and I thought, wow, that's really cool. Then of course I kept hearing it, and I kept hearing it.
When you're young,
and I thought, oh, okay, I get it.
It's like, wow, the FBI responded.
I know.
But then you get the same response over and over and over again, and you're thinking, Do they just,
I
do
get
they
it,
actually, Jennifer, can you tell me, do they type the words I can neither confirm or deny, or do they just copy and paste it from all the previous emails that they send out? That's really what I want to know.
We have it memorized on the second day of training school.
It's just built into the fabric of their brains.
But I get it, because too much information, it can, the novel Crime and Punishment, which I was told to read as a young journalist, talks about it. You know, a cop, an investigator, does not want a suspect, a defendant, to say, oh, well, if they incriminate themselves, they can't, if it hasn't been released and they know it's locked down, that suspect cannot go, oh, I heard it on the, I heard that on TV. I heard that on TV. No, you didn't. We didn't release that information. And that guy's now incriminated himself. That's a basic reason. I get that.
Jennifer, we appreciate you and your candor, and thank you. And you're always welcome back. I'm sure we'll see you on News Nation tonight.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All righty. Jennifer Coffendoffer, everybody. And
my friend, I've got to leave in like 5 minutes.
That's all right. It's all right. I'm used
it was
to it,
interesting
man.
to be
I stream
back,
alone
man.
all the time.
You've come a long way since you were out in the newsroom, where
know.
we didn't show the wide shot. And,
yeah. So look, now we have the wide shot.
Yeah, it's nice.
And we're coming back to everybody to the content matter, or the subject matter rather. But yeah, Walt, it's this is your first time in here streaming with me?
No, I think a couple other times.
Okay.
But yeah. Always,
oh no, wait, the first live stream we ever did in here, you were part of.
That's right. We just talked about
it.
Yeah. And you haven't asked me since, and I think it's because I don't walk by your desk anymore.
Well, you gotta come say hello, man.
You're separate. You should have you. Do you have a piece where you show?
Okay, so I will have to go in just a few minutes as well, but I wanted to just recap, and I'll probably come back and do another and do another one soon, where I just recap everything. But the arraignment happened at 9 a.m. Moscow time. And what happened is that Kohberger stood silent, standing silent, which means that he didn't actually himself give a plea of guilty or not guilty. But by default, if you stand silent, it goes into a not guilty plea. All sorts of things that can be read into that. To me, it feels suspicious, right? Like, why wouldn't you just say you're not guilty instead of, wouldn't a defendant who knows that they're not guilty just want to say the words not guilty? It's almost like, it does feel like a weird controlled power play to not actually say it. Kind of like, if the words don't come out of my mouth, then I can know. It's kind of like Jennifer Coffender. I can neither confirm nor deny that I killed them. Okay, well then by default, then we're going to say that you didn't kill them. Interestingly. Okay, so that happened. And then the other thing is that, so because of this, now the prosecution has 60 days to enter a notice of whether they're going to pursue the death penalty in this case. Now, really fascinating is that they are not waiving their right to a speedy trial, like what they did the first time back in January. They waived that speedy trial, and because I guess the defense attorney suggested not doing that, not waiving it. So by not waiving the speedy trial, they're going to have the hearing in October, and it's because I guess you have 6 months, which we put it at November 22nd. And then she said, the defense attorney Ann Taylor suggested it would take 4 to 6 weeks for trial. So then I guess they back it up, and it's on October 2nd. So that's 4.5 months away, that's very soon for a case like this, especially with like what everybody keeps saying, 50 tetrabytes of information. So that's really, really very, very interesting. And then let's see what else here. Kohberger's family did not appear to be there, but the Gonzalez family was there. And Kaylee Gonzalez's sister, Olivia, actually had her baby with her. It was really heartwarming to see. And so I thought that was really interesting. The judge also said that once the grand jury indicted Kohberger, that the preliminary hearing was officially vacated. And let's see what else. There will be a court hearing on June 9th to address the gag order. So the second hearing, motion hearing, or the second hearing that happened today was a scheduling conference between that included the Gonzalez family and the media group led by the AP. And so they are going to schedule, or they have scheduled, another hearing on June 9th to address the gag order. And then they're going to have another hearing on June 27th to address to discuss whether they can have cameras in the courtroom, which is apparently a big deal, right? Because the Lori Vallow case that happened in Idaho did not have cameras in the courtroom. Oh, and just correction, because I'm reading Brian Unton's tweet. He said, correction, both the gag order and cameras will be addressed on the 9th. 27th is an evidentiary hearing. So the 27th will be an evidentiary hearing. I've got to check that. Evidentiary hearing. Okay. All right. So that's the latest that I have on this trial so far. This next hour is supposed to be the motion hearing to compel discovery between the defense asking the prosecution for discovery. And I'm just going to wait here another minute or two and see if anything else pops up for that. And if not, then we'll wrap up. And but I would love to hear your thoughts. What did you think? Was it a surprise, like it was for me, that he would stand silent and default to not guilty? What did you think? Anything so far that's been interesting, out of the ordinary, a surprise, or has it just been exactly what you thought? While we do that, I will go to play this again.
Move from, you must have.
I think, yeah, I off some her sister is live. And this might be News Nation's camera path. And I believe this is live, but I will confirm if this is live. And this might be for a variety of different reasons. It might be to capture Brian Kohberger leaving the Latah County Courthouse, but we'll keep an eye. In fact, I'll bring this up here in the center of our screen. Do you have another few minutes to do a rapid fire Q&A?
Yes, I do.
And that way that
I think I'm in pretty good shape. I've been doing some other work while I'm here. Yeah,
cool.
For sure.
So, folks, starting now, #HeyWalt only. Questions and comments just for WFLA's senior investigator here on the right side of your screen, who's working on a lot of stories here in Florida right now, but he took time out of his day to come hang out with us in the stream center. So let's get to comments. I'm only looking for #HeyWalt. If you have an observation that has gone unnoticed, if you have a question that has gone unasked, I'm really trying to get as many up on screen. We'll look for HeyWalt in a second, but really quickly, will the jury be sequestered? That's a good question. I mean, how does the this is more of a question for Peter Tragos or one of the other legal analysts that we have here on stream. Maybe a Bryant Camareno is another one, but how you protect the jury and make sure that the jury is as neutral and as
sequestration is really not done that often. I'm not sure if either of those attorneys would agree it's extreme. I know when I've tried to think, oh, that juror will be sequestered, I was wrong. So it's possible it won't be sequestered. The judge tells the jurors, beginning of the day, end of the day, generally, maybe at lunch break, probably at lunch break, do not watch any media, do not do this, do not do that. Do they really do it? Who knows? But they are told and they are warned, and jurors get removed. It's really embarrassing to get removed, but it's hard. It's harder now than it's ever been because we have social media as well. And so that's a hard thing to predict.
About the new judge.
#HeyWalt, can you tell us a little bit about why the judge was changed and what that may mean about the gag order? So really quickly, the judge was changed because this went to district court.
Right.
So it's in a different court now. And that is, of course, that changes the legal sort
well,
of.
Well, that's an
trajectory.
arraignment court generally. You're arraigned there. I don't think it impacts the gag order. And I think if I was a betting man, and you probably could bet on it somewhere, I would say the gag order remains in place. In a state like Idaho, it remains in place. In a different state, in a less conservative state, it might be removed. But I would bet in a state like Idaho, and maybe even in a less conservative state, I would think you keep the gag order again, because this story has such intrigue. It will no doubt be a movie. There's going to be multiple books. I think there's already one underway. There is a thirst for information from people like Purple Freak Vape Queen. and
Hi, Twitter.
Right. There's she wants information. They want information. People want information.
Yeah.
And we want to give the information, and we want to do it the best way possible. We want to beat the competition when it comes to getting the information. Those things collide, and there will be such a thirst for information about this case, especially not only in Idaho, in small Idaho, sparsely populated Idaho, but everywhere across the world for this case. So,
and as far as what that may mean about the gag order, Brian Enton tweeting out 11 minutes ago, there are two different issues happening in court right now with the Kohberger gag order. The Goncalves Goncalves attorney wants clarity so that he can speak on behalf of his client. And the media coalition is fighting for more public information and less strict of a gag order. And then 3 minutes ago, Enton tweeting, the judge is not making any decisions today on the Kohberger gag order. Hearings set for June 9th to address it. Also a hearing June 27th to address cameras in court.
But if it's a law that they, even in states where where it's open, the judge can still say no cameras. And
what's interesting, every now and again a case comes around that changes policy.
Yeah.
And you have to wonder if this case, I mean, I understand that Idaho's had high profile cases, and we all know the ones that come to mind, but this one might have influence on court policy and be looked at as an example as to why cameras should or should not be permitted in a courtroom in Idaho. And also, too, at the same time, should streaming be permitted? So very interesting to me.
The original reason cameras were kicked out of courtrooms was not about information. It was not about information getting out. It was about the noise of the camera.
Oh, wow.
Because it was film cameras. Yeah. Right.
Ooh,
and that's a long time ago. That's why. And then
you can hear everything in a courtroom. For anyone who's never been in like a courtroom for a jury trial,
you should do it. By the way, if you have never been in the courtroom for a jury trial, you should do it, because it will change your perspective on our system.
Somebody could be pouring. Sometimes you'll see the pouring of a glass of water, and you can hear everything. The acoustics in most courtrooms are so vibrant and loud. You can hear even the slightest, people shifting in their seats sometimes, something as quiet as that.
That's right.
Real quick, just refreshing here, make sure I'm not missing anything from... Oh, okay, no, Brian Enton, correction. Both the gag order and cameras will be addressed on the 9th. 27th is an event... I always have difficulty with this word.
Evidentiary.
It's one of those words that I have a block. Evidentiary. Man, every now and again, I come across a word where I'm like,
I have a few of those.
We all have a few of them. Yeah,
it's weird.
But yes, so
we'll know on the 9th. The evidentiary hearing will be about discovery. I'm sure there will be complaints on. Usually, you hear a complaint on the defense side. I'm not getting this stuff fast enough, and that's important because the defense wants to build a case. I doubt it's going to be tried in October, but they want the evidence faster because they want to build their case. They want to see what the prosecution has, and quite frankly, the prosecution does not want to necessarily show their cards. They might deny that, but I think that's part of the game, if you will, the gamesmanship in a trial.
Oh, I want to get 3 more #HeyWalt in before we let you go. Danielle, #HeyWalt. I think Brian wanted to hear the judge say the words not guilty and hoping that that's the final outcome, and that's why he stood silent.
An interesting view of and a theoretical peek into the mind of an accused killer, and that's possible. He did study criminology. Does that have an impact on it? That's the second opinion we've heard that goes along that way.
Eve says, just really quickly, yeah. So the pronunciation of the last name, I think Jennifer was saying Goncalves, and that was throwing me for
Gonsalves.
Kind of got stuck in there.
I've
so
seen
I
that
believe
name.
it's Gonzalez.
Gonzalez?
No, yeah, Gonzalez. Yeah,
I've heard that. I've seen that name pronounced all three ways.
And this is why again the pronunciation of names, it's really important.
Yes, it is.
It's important, but people make mistakes, and my goodness, the one that no pronunciation was more discussed than Alex Murdaugh. Alex Murdaugh or Alex Murdaugh? That was I had reporter friends from multiple states. I had reporter that one, and people still can't agree on if it's Murdaugh
that's frustrating.
or Murdaugh.
From our point of view, that's frustrating. And in various stories, multiple stories in my career, the pronunciation has changed from day 1 to day 5 and then gone back to day 1. Yeah. And it's a discussion. And we don't take, I mean, at least I don't take it lightly. I've had people say, tell me after, oh, my name's pronounced this way. I go, why didn't you tell me? Oh, it doesn't matter. Yes, it does.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell them yes. Or I asked him before, how do you pronounce your name? Oh, some people say this, some people say that. What do you say? Because it is important, especially when it's a loved one. And so there should be an effort to clarify that and make a national sort of like AP puts pronunciation guides on.
It took me 3 months to get your name right.
There are people in our newsroom who still don't have it right. So.
Buteau.
Yeah, Buteau, but it's not. Listen closely at the next meeting.
I know people still get it wrong.
I don't care. That.
I'm
within my family, we pronounce it 4 different ways.
I get Buno a lot of different ways.
Right.
Too.
So I remember with you, I thought Bono, I think. But
did you call me?
No, I didn't call you that. Bono.
That would be funny. I don't think I've ever been called Bono.
Sonny Buno.
Yeah.
No.
I just mine's easy. Buno.
Buno.
That's how you say it.
You got a brand.
Buteau.
Well, you
have to emphasize the toe, man.
Buteau. Yeah. But that's just one pronunciation within my family. They pronounce it differently, so I don't take it personally.
Look, I see him every day, and and it took a while for me to get his pronunciation right. Reminder: it's easier said.
There you go.
No, it's not easier said than done. You guys get what I'm saying. Let's see here. That was we got 2 more. Holly says you sound like Joe Rogan. You ever get that one?
I have. I need to listen to Joe Rogan to figure out what that means.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I guess that's not an insult.
It was the first #HeyWalt comment that I saw. And looking here at any others.
How many do you got? You have some that is that what you're doing right now? Let me get inside how the sausage is made here. Are you streaming through a number of questions and looking for the one that might be most pertinent? Is that what you're doing?
My work.
Interesting.
Interactive journalism. I don't, if you use the hashtag, it's not a guarantee that you get your comment on screen. I'm trying to carry the conversation forward here and try to get to questions we haven't seen before. And some of them are on topic and some are just people want to know, hey, Walt, who's your favorite baseball team?
I hate to say it's the Oakland A's.
It's rough times, man.
They're setting a record for futility.
Rough times. Charles G, #HeyWalt. Do you think that this case could be open and shut with the jury or could end in a hung jury based on the evidence that is available to the public?
It really depends on the defense attorney. It really good to. I've been in cases that seemed open and shut. That, the O.J. Simpson trial, right? They make what you will of that. So I don't know. That's such a hard thing to predict. And at this point, does he have he has a public defender, doesn't he? Does he have a public defender?
Mm-hmm.
So, does the public defender should be allowed to get enough resources, as in money, to have great experts, because that's what's fair. Does that happen? You hope it happens, because he is not guilty of anything right now. He is officially not guilty. And so it just depends on the defense team, depends on the expert witnesses. Are you able to get the best a DNA guy in the country to do that? Do you have the resources to get the best DNA guy in the country? Because if you don't find the murder weapon, DNA is going to be huge.
In the field of genetic genealogy, as I understand it, being used to get, narrow down to the Kohberger family and forensics.
Huge.
And digital forensics will be absolutely
expert
monumental in this trial.
That's right. That's right.
Speaking of trial, Sarah wants to know, #Hey Walt, can he still plead insanity or incompetence? And
I think that's not allowed. I don't think Ohio. I thought you had in Idaho. Idaho, do you not have that option?
And even if you did have that option, is it past this is a
I don't think if they have the option, I don't believe it's past that point. I don't believe. I think that could happen at any time. Good question for a legal expert. I don't know the answer to that, but
it's a great, I mean, again, we were supposed to have the lawyer, Peter Tragos, to provide legal expertise on this live stream. He texted me saying he had a technical issue that he could not believe.
The insanity defense. The insanity defense has not been available in Idaho since 1982.
Wow.
According to
look at him attributing
News Nation. That according to a legal expert. So no.
Last one, we'll get you out on this. #Hey Walt from Cheryl. Do you think they'll be able to find an impartial jury? We asked this question before every high profile trial.
I've been I've covered stories of international intrigue and I'm always amazed that as you sit during the voir dire process, or as a judge in Texas once called it, voir dire, but it's really voir dire.
Pronunciations, man.
And that's basically jury selection, right? As you go through that process, you'd be amazed. And I'm assuming that Cheryl, it's not my sister Cheryl, is it?
Cheryl, are you Cheryl? Buteau?
She might pronounce it differently, but I'm assuming Cheryl, anybody on this feed is into this story.
Yeah.
So they can't imagine somebody who is not into the story, right? Well, there are people if you sit in on the voir dire process, in this case, I guarantee you will find people who, I don't know a lot about it. I didn't really read the headlines, but keep in mind, it's okay if you have extensive knowledge about a case. You can still be put on a jury, and keep in mind, attorneys get peremptory challenges. They agree on how many they get. That basically means I don't want JB on my jury. I don't have to say why. I just don't want him on my jury. But some people, it might strategically, and this would be a great question for an attorney, you might want them to know a lot about the case. One side might want them to know a lot about the case, and they may want to get them into that pool, into the final jury.
Jury
and
selection is huge.
It is great. It's the strategy that because you only need one. You only need one. You need to cast some doubt with one juror. And if you can get 3 or 4 that maybe think, maybe they don't, I don't know. What would you look for here? You'd look for somebody who doesn't, and maybe a little anti-government that might trump up charges.
Yeah, but how do you find that out through jury selection?
Good question.
Yeah, the questionnaire would include something that would hint for that bias.
But then I think it's a matter of I think a good defense team has somebody who specializes in jury selection, and they know body language. They know, I said this, well, that might mean this. And I think jury selection
is fascinating.
Is the most fascinating part of a case. But as a reporter, can be quote unquote boring because we don't really know exactly the machinations that are going into what's being asked. And so you can imagine it. You kind of find out after from a good attorney, oh, we liked this jury because of this. Yes, the answer, yes, they will find an impartial jury. I believe in the system. I really do. And I think that it may amaze you as you're following this case.
I'm going to tell you a story. You're going to love this. I'm always trying to advance how we do news here, streaming, interactivity. And I was on a call a few weeks ago with 3 developers, 3 brilliant people. We were talking about, streaming and interactivity and social media, and we were having a great conversation. And I made a reference to, one time I did, one time I had a need for a tool that would help me do this in the Gabby Petito story. And all 3 of them, this is a true story. All 3. Well, no, it was one guy who said, what was that story? Gabby Petito.
There you go.
And he goes,
right.
And he goes, who's Gabby Petito? Because they needed context to understand that it was a missing persons case.
That's right.
And so I said, oh, Gabby Petito, missing person, national search for
international intrigue.
Yeah, I mean, international intrigue.
Yeah.
And then I was blown away because the second and third developers on the call, he asked, hey, you guys ever hear Gabby Petito? And I go, no. And they were not, I know for a fact, they were not having a go at me or anything like that. They genuinely had no idea who Gabby Petito was. And it was through all three developers on this call.
Wow.
So
and
can you find an impartial jury?
Yes,
can you find
and keep this in mind too, Cheryl, whether you're my sister or not, keep this in mind. There are people who don't want to be on juries because for multiple reasons, fear, time, right? So they are going to poison their answers, and you can see it when you watch voir dire. But there are also people who want to be on the jury, and they might even say, and I'm sure this has happened. Oh, I've never heard about this case. No, because they might want to be on the jury because it's intriguing to be on a jury for this case if you have the time. So that, I mean, does that mean they're impartial? It may or may not, but it does help the ability to find a so-called impartial jury.
This is the gag order hearing. Let's listen in live. Walt will let you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's open it up. Okay. Say something, Mr. Perone. Still, I don't know. Technology is great until it's not. Okay. Are your speakers all the way out, Mr. Perone? Tap it or hit it. Just kidding. Do we have tech people who take care of this?
JB here with you in the Stream Center. Just wanted to let everybody know I'm boosting the audio just a little bit so that hopefully everybody can hear, but this is the raw audio being boosted a little bit out of Idaho. This is, again, believed to be the gag order hearing out of Idaho.
Somebody is trying to fix that? Ms. Masses, excuse me, can I hear you now? Say something. Oh yeah, what I can do is I can, should I just move mine up? And that will pick it up. Then we'll have a big echo. Obviously, I am not very skilled at such things. Okay. Really sorry for all the delays. There were other things going on before I came into court, and now we have this. So thank you for your patience. Okay, while we're waiting for that, I'm going to recognize Mr. Gray, who's representing the Gonsalves family. My plan was to go through the variety of motions that each representative has, starting with the Associated Press, then going to the Gonsalves family, and then to the party's counsel, and we'll see where we go. But we're not going to have an 11 o'clock because we're just going to take care of all the scheduling issues now in this hearing.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Yeah, let's go off the record until we can fix this. Thank you. Okay. Can you say something, Mr. Perone? We're off the record. Don't worry.
Mr. Perone.
Fine with me.
Okay. So go ahead and do that.
So I've got to unmute myself.
Okay.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, Your Honor.
And I can hear you, Mr. Perone.
We got
an
echo
echo
now.
now.
This is more than
More
my
than my outside
voice.
voice.
Okay, is that better? Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Marilyn. Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Let's get back on the record then. Back on the record, State versus Brian Kohberger, CR 29222805. I was explaining how the order and the scheduling conference might go, at least my plan. And so I'm going to start with you, Mr. Carone. Your clients have the motion to vacate the amended non-dissemination order filed May 1. Also the motion to intervene filed May 1, same date. And now this case is in my hands, so I need to set a hearing. And I'm wondering how far out. I'd like to get some briefs, and this is a message to everybody before the hearing, including I want to hear arguments about whether or not there should be cameras in the courtroom in a high-profile case like this one. So, Mr. Carone, what looks good for you? And let me throw out, knowing that a lot of you were prepared to be here the week of June 26th, that might make sense. But I'll hear from you, Mr. Carone.
Yes, Your Honor. So with our motion to vacate, motion to intervene, we've briefed the merits issues there. I think as the court's aware, we also briefed those issues with the Idaho Supreme Court, so I would think we could be ready to move pretty quickly. We have not briefed the issue about video cameras in the courtroom, so if that's something that you'd like the media coalition to weigh in on as well, we would need to submit a separate brief on that, but we can do that in the week of the 26th. The 26th itself, I'm not available, but the rest of the week would work.
Excellent. And I'll tell you, the reason that I'm bringing up cameras in the courtroom is because if I address that issue, and I haven't let you all know that that might be an issue, then I'm going to get a lot of grief for not allowing you to brief that issue. So that's why I'm giving you an advance notice on that. How do you feel about the afternoon of June 27? Given what's happening just quite recently, we might want to do that in person. I'm willing to do it remotely, but then we have to, there are a lot of different interests and different people who want to weigh in on that, so it might be better to be in person. But does that work for you? Say starting at 1:30, June 27, Mr. Carone?
Yes, Your Honor, that works for me. And Ms. Olson and myself can both come in person. We would have been there today in person, but we found out about the in-person option on Friday, so I apologize for using Zoom today, but we can certainly be there in person. If the court's anticipating hearing from witnesses that day and hold an evidentiary hearing, there may be some witnesses that would want to appear via Zoom if that's okay with the court. But I'm not sure if that's even something you're contemplating. I'm just flagging it in case you are.
Well, let me put it this way. It's your motion and others' motions. One of the complaints that I've seen in the briefing is that there's no evidence in the case supporting any of it. You know, we're all kind of moving forward on supposition, I guess. And some of it is obvious, but I think that would be wise. I suppose you could just file declarations, and that's what's been doing how that's been going. If we're going to have a lot of testimony, I might want to move this back to 10 a.m. just to make sure that we have enough time to get things finished that day. Would that work for you?
Sure. So our position on the evidentiary issue is your summary was correct that we don't believe that there is an adequate factual record at this point. Given that it is our motion and it's based on the record that existed when the order was issued, procedurally, I'm not really sure there is an opportunity for additional evidence to be put forth. I only brought that up because I saw in Mr. Kohberger's opposition to our motion for reconsideration that there was a mention of an expert witness. If that evidence was going to come forward or other evidence, we of course would want the opportunity to cross-examine that individual or whatever individuals might be testifying. But as things currently stand for the record as it exists and the evidence that the media coalition intends to put forward, we included a declaration with their motion. I'm not sure there's really need for us to put on additional evidence, but if that's something the court was going to hear from the state or Mr. Kohberger, then I just wanted to bring that to the court's attention.
Thank you, Mr. Corona. Of course, you'd have the opportunity to cross-examine any witness. All right. Well, we'll stay at 1:30 then. So now, Mr. Gray. So I'm thinking that maybe we should keep these things together and do them the same day if that works for you and your clients.
Well, Your Honor, I see the issue very clearly different from the AP's motion versus my motion. I think their motion is more of a getting rid of the non-dissemination order, the gag order. My motion is a motion to amend and or clarify some of the issues in the gag order. They have a lot of constitutional different issues that we have. I have some issues that I think are very separate. So I would request a hearing on my own much sooner. I think the court's aware I filed this motion in February on this case, and there was a massive delay based on the fact that previous Judge Marshall was waiting for the Supreme Court to get some clarification regarding the AP's motion that she filed with the Supreme Court. So I'm ready to go when the court's ready to go, but I think our issues are very, very different than that of the AP's motion on this case. So I would request a hearing much sooner I can do it by the end of this week.
All right. Well, and I recognize this was all pretty short notice for everybody. And I don't know if, let me go to Mr. Rudley and then Mr. Logsdon, because they're going to weigh in on that motion as well, I'm assuming. I'm thinking about maybe June 9th would be the soonest I could do this, but let me go to you, Mr. Logston.
Your Honor, we'd be ready to go and would expect to put on an evidentiary presentation that week of the 26th. To the extent that Mr. Gray wants to have his motion heard ahead of time, and just based on what I've read in it, I mean, obviously, if the court were to agree with some of the things that he says.
Into the mic, I guess.
Sorry. Obviously, if the court were to agree with some of the things that he says and winds up amending the order, that could change everything for everybody else. So to some extent, I think it actually is probably better to do them all at the same time, so the court isn't in piecemeal changing what we're all arguing about. But I would be ready for the 9th if the court chose to do it that way.
No judge likes to do things piecemeal. But I also understand that Mr. Gray and his clients have been waiting for a long time now. It's not anybody's fault. It's just how that came down, because the Associated Press et al. Went straight to the Supreme Court in February, early February, and that would trigger a delay, which it did, and it was important, I think, for Judge Marshall to get the direction from the Idaho Supreme Court before we start, chipping away at each order. I don't know if would you be. I mean, I'm okay setting it for June 9th, Mr. Gray, but you may have some testimony happening. You may want to wait until you hear what everybody else is saying. It's likely that there's going to be some adjustments, you might say, or clarifying in the order. Partly in my reading of the Supreme Court's decision, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but there were some hints maybe of what the trial court might want to consider. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Gray.
I was going to say, since this is your gag order now, this non-dissemination order, Your Honor, and in reading my motion, if the court does want to consider making some of the modifications that might have been suggested in my motion, my motion may end up being moot. I think some of my modifications and or clarifications to the non-dissemination order are fairly minor, but allows, and I think the Supreme Court did give some guidance, which I think added weight to my arguments and my motion. So it's not above the court to take a look at my motion as well as any other motions that have been submitted to the court and modify the non-dissemination order, allowing for some of the issues that I discussed in my motion, and then you would only have the AP who are attacking, I think, the gag order as a whole, the non-dissemination order as a whole. I'm just addressing a couple of clarifications and amendments that would allow myself as an attorney to speak on behalf of my clients that regarding the non-dissemination order. And I think it's your order now, so you're more than apt to be able to go and make those changes, and then we wouldn't have an issue with the non-dissemination order at all. So I don't think that's, so obviously the 9th, I'd like to keep the 9th because my issues are very small and narrow regarding that non-dissemination order. But if you were to make changes to those ahead of time that I was able to review and it was acceptable, I would withdraw my motion, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gray.
Thank you.
Well, it would be highly unlikely for me to change the order before I hear from counsel, because I don't want to, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. I only want to do this once, and I'm happy to set it for June 9th, maybe 10:30. Does that work for you?
That does, Your Honor.
Okay. Does that work for you, Mr. Rudley?
Yes, Your Honor, it does.
Okay. Mr. Logston?
Make it work, Judge.
Okay. Let's do that in person. Okay. So now we have the June 9th at 10:30. We also have the Associated Press et al. On June 27th at 1:30. I assume that works for you, Mr. Radley?
It does, Your Honor.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent.
Your Honor, may I speak?
Yes, Mr. Corona.
Your Honor, I apologize. I may have misunderstood what you said earlier. I was understanding that the week of June 26th was when the court was first available, but if the court is available to hear our motion earlier, we would be available on June 9th as well. I know that our most recent motion is pending more recently, but obviously we've been challenging this since February as well. And it's our position that the non-dissemination order violates the Associated Press and Media Coalition's First Amendment rights. Those constitutional violations are irreparable. So we would like our motions to be as soon as possible as well. And I suggested otherwise by agreeing to the week of the 26th. That was simply because I misunderstood that was when the court was first available.
Thank you. Only one thing I'll say about that. Irreparable harm goes both ways. And so I was a little bit troubled by that claim without considering the Sixth Amendment considerations. I mean, this is a balancing. The law is clear on this. Okay, it's a balancing test. And when your client says that it's arguing it as the First Amendment is absolute, is also troubling. So I would suggest that maybe the Associated Press needs to tone it down, just ratchet down a little bit. Because some of the arguments, including the first line in the motion to intervene, says that the Supreme Court held a certain thing, that I do not think that is what the court held. And you know the difference in a holding of an appellate court. So I just felt obligated to help you out a little bit in terms of what the Associated Press is asking for. And in the meantime, there's a lot of potential irreparable harm from media that is affecting a fair trial. So that is really concerning. This is a very high-profile case. So I'm happy to set this on June 9th, too. Okay, how about we set yours at 1:30 though, so we don't kind of push them all together. Does that work for you, Mr. Rudley?
It does, Your Honor.
Okay, does that work for you, Mr. Logston?
Sure, I don't know if we'll have an evidentiary presentation ready by the 9th. That would be my concern. We can certainly try.
Well, let's see, and if that doesn't work out for you, then we'll talk about it. Okay, I just felt the obligation to talk about irreparable harm. Okay, there's a lot of interest here, Mr. Carone, and I think my job, my constitutional responsibility is to consider all of the potential irreparable harms, or all the injuries, or all the harms. So, I just want, maybe it's appropriate, I was just thinking, I just want to remind everybody, okay, on this particular issue, but all issues, at all times, that we all, okay, judges, lawyers, journalists, media generally, have constitutional responsibilities to both the First Amendment and the Sixth Amendment. And what I generally am seeing in the newspaper and the media is no discussion about the importance of the Sixth Amendment. It's just the First Amendment, which is very important. But here's the real reminder. The first sentence of the preamble of the Idaho Rules of Professional Conduct says that a lawyer, as a member of the legal profession, is a representative of clients, an officer of the legal system, and a public citizen having special responsibility for the quality of justice. We all have that responsibility. And sometimes we push in a hard way for our clients, and that's appropriate. But you have larger responsibilities at the same time. Okay, so we got a hearing 10:30. That's for the Gonzalez family with Mr. Gray. 1:30 is the Associated Press et al. With Mr. Carone. And I think that deals with all the pending motions. For you, Mr. Gray, you articulated what your motion is. So we've addressed that.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yes,
Okay.
yes, Your Honor.
You're welcome. And Mr. Carone, those two issues that are still outliers on your clients, I think that's all we have. The motion to vacate the amended non-dissemination order and the motion to intervene. Anything else that we need to address for your clients, Mr. Carone?
No, Your Honor, unless you mentioned the broadcasting issue as well. I'm not sure if you're going to set a separate briefing schedule for that. Obviously, the motions don't follow the briefing schedule. Since we haven't followed that yet, I just didn't know when exactly you want to happen.
I'm going to send a briefing schedule out for everybody. And now, okay, if we're going to do it on June 9th, you don't have very much time to do those briefs. So that's why I was thinking it made a lot more sense to do it at the end of June. But if you all think you're ready to do that, I'm willing to hear it. But I want those briefs. We'll say by June 2nd. Response briefs will be due by June 6th, and any reply briefs due by June 8th. So that's going to be rapid briefing. I'm just trying to accommodate everybody. Okay? I got a lot of interest floating around on these issues. Without forgetting Mr. Kohberger, who's primary in this case right now. All right, so let's move to, and I mean, anybody who's here for Associated Press or Gonzalez family can be excused if you'd like. You're also happy to have you stay. No problem.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Farrell. All right. So what we have now between the parties is motion to compel, which we're moving out. That is kind of a on and off hearing. Disclosures of grand jury materials while protecting those materials from the public. An extension time to file pre-trial motions after receiving materials from grand jury. I believe those are the motions that we have outstanding. Is this, are you arguing these or scheduling these, Ms. Taylor?
Your Honor, we can schedule all of those hearings.
Okay, when do you want to do this?
Your Honor, I think that if the court has June 26th, we can do that. We will be ready to address that round of motions on June 26th.
Excellent. We'll have that 1:30 on June 27th because the Associated Press move that to the 9th.
June 27th is just fine for us.
Okay, perfect. 1:30. Okay. Is there anything else we need to address today, Mr. Rudley? Mr. Thompson?
Your Honor, I think the June 27th should work fine. For whatever reason, our office hasn't seen copies of the grand jury pretrial motions, but I think there was a miscommunication. Those will be coming. We'll be prepared.
Okay, great. And certainly if those issues are resolved between counsel, then we won't have to have a hearing.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so anything else we need to address today, Ms. Taylor?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Watson?
There, thank you.
Okay. Great. So I think Ms. Masseth has been observing on Zoom. I just wanted to identify her, and also Ms. Let's see. Oh, I guess Ms. Beatty is too. So anyway, there are other people on the Zoom. So thank you. Okay. Anything else then? No. Okay. Thank you all. We are adjourned.
Brian Kohberger exiting this hearing, 2 hearings that were on the court schedule, one for the gag order, the other for the motion to compel, and that was the pool camera feed, feeding that out to the media. JB here with you live, folks, on WFLA Now. Good to have you back. That's a live shot from outside the Latah County Courthouse. Joining us now live, I want to get right to him. You know him because his name is quite literally the lawyer you know. Peter Tragos is back with us here on stream. Peter, you and I did a lot of conversation about the Idaho murders at the University of Idaho. We did a lot of conversation about Brian Kohberger and the legal situation surrounding him. Let's just dive right in. We're going to start to take your questions, folks, out of the YouTube, Twitter, Facebook Live comment sections, TikTok as well. #KJB. #lawyer you know, as we let those comments.
So Peter Tragos is a criminal defense attorney, and he's also based out of Florida. And he is his YouTube handle is the lawyer you know. I believe his other handles on other socials is Tragos Law.
Let's come in with those hashtags so that we can animate them on screen. Peter, your perspective as far as what has unfolded so far today. Brian Kohberger being arraigned, standing silent, the judge entering a not guilty plea, and now we have a trial date for October 2nd.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that's happened today to unpack already. Just starting with the arraignment, the choice to stand silent, it is a choice. It is not the norm. You would think if you want to claim you are innocent, that you would say, I am not guilty of these charges. We've heard that in other cases, specifically Murdoch pounded the table, continued to throughout the entirety of his trial, even after he lost. Many people do it even after they lost. And right now, Brian Kohberger has decided not to do it when it's the most public time to say that he is not guilty. It could mean absolutely nothing, or it could mean maybe we are going to work towards a plea deal, or something is happening behind the scenes that we just don't know about yet.
Peter, I just want to bring up the very first comment that we have from our audience. And it's from Lissy, who says that we're neutral and unbiased as far as covering this case. We really appreciate a lot of the appreciation that we get on YouTube. Peter and I have seen a lot of the comments that have come in over the last 5 months. We have not talked about this case, Peter, since January, but a lot of people do, of course, appreciate just some of the interaction that you and I have, and then of course the interaction that we have with our audience. So let's start to get into some of the #KJB, #lawyer you know, questions and comments. And it starts here from SH, #lawyer you know. When will we know if the prosecution is going for the death penalty?
So I think today was so important as the arraignment and his not guilty plea, because it started the clock on a couple things. It starts the clock on the state's ability to file a notice of intent to seek the death penalty in Idaho. They have 60 days from today and it triggered his speedy trial. 6 months from today, they have to set his trial, which is why the trial date, I think, is October 2nd or sometime in early October, which is near the end of the speedy trial period, which I think is also interesting that the defense chose to kind of kick it out as much as they could without waiving speedy trial, which I think is the best case scenario here and exactly what I would do if I was the defense attorney on this case. It gives yourself as much time as possible because they can still waive it anytime they want. They can show up on October 7th, ask for a continuance, waive speedy trial, and then kick it down the road. Or if they want to keep the pressure on, they can push the state to get that case tried on October 2nd.
You know me, I like to put you on the spot, Peter, with percentage chances. I've done it a lot of times on our previous live streams together. Percentage chances that this actually begins in early October.
5%.
Wow, that low.
Yeah, I think they do not seem to be pushing the envelope on this case. They waived his speedy preliminary hearing. I think they've been working in the background with the state, working on discovery issues. They wanted to delay this gag order hearing. They have to prepare. They have to get things ready. That's another thing that's going to take another month of work, that they're not working on the case because they're working on the gag order. They push it till the very end of the speedy trial period. So anything happens and they have to extend it basically at all, the judge is going to ask, are you agreeing to waive your speedy trial right? Because if they file motions saying the state refuses to give us this stuff, or they file motions doing anything to delay the case, they're going to have to waive their speedy trial. And I think that that's probably the likely scenario at the end of the day, but things could change over the next 6 months.
We will be paying very close attention. A lot more to go over with Peter Tragos. For those of you refinding the live stream, perhaps you saw the arraignment earlier here in the center of your screen. Maybe you're coming back to YouTube Live, Facebook Live, TikTok Live, or WFLA.com. We're on here live with Peter Tragos, the lawyer you know, who has done a lot of different live streams about Brian Kohberger and, of course, the University of Idaho murders. And I'm sure that he will have live streams in the hours, days ahead as well. Let's go to this one from Brianna. Hashtag lawyer you know. Do you think Brian's silence is likely at the advice of his lawyer for the sake of the court, or excuse me, for the sake of the court of public opinion?
Yeah, I think that's a really good guess, which is all we're doing at this point. But by doing anything outside the norm, they know people are going to talk about it. Okay, it's not a surprise because he could have just said not guilty. That's what everybody was expecting. People that think he's guilty in the media or in the court of public opinion are still going to think he's guilty even if he says not guilty. People that think there's something fishy going on, he probably didn't do it, they're still going to think that if he says not guilty. It wasn't really going to change anybody's perception if he would have just said not guilty. That's what everybody expected. But doing something different is interesting. My guess is it could have been on the advice of counsel because we know the gag order arguments, we know the media attention, we know the public concern and interest in this case is high. So maybe she just said they're going to pick apart every word you say, the way you say not guilty. If it's too soft, if it's too strong, they're going to pick you apart for that. So just say nothing. Effectually, legally speaking, it's still a not guilty plea, and let's just keep the case rolling.
Very interesting. And he did voice words today in responding to the judge. So it's not as if he didn't want to speak, because he was listening for the prompts of when to speak, and then he chose to speak when Judge asked him various questions over the course of the arraignment. However, that moment he chose to stand silence as far as the moment when it was time for him to enter a plea. I want to go to Team Brittany here, who's one of our great moderators on the WFLA YouTube page. Even our moderators can ask questions. Of course, they're very much part of the process here, what we do interactively on WFLA Now, hashtag lawyer you know. If you have a moment, could you explain to the chat what you spoke about the other day as to wording, may and could versus does, as it relates to a person having exculpatory evidence?
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here, and depending on whether we're talking about the grand jury or anywhere throughout the process, but during the discovery questions and some statements made by the defense, you will hear them say there may be exculpatory evidence here that the state hasn't turned over. That does not mean the state is hiding exculpatory evidence. The state has already once in this case said that they are turning something over because they want to make sure they're within the Brady. They don't make a Brady violation, which would be a discovery violation, withholding exculpatory evidence. So the state knows if something like that comes up, they have to provide it to the defense. So it doesn't seem like they're hiding anything, but in order to highlight the importance of certain documents or certain videos or certain audio recordings, the defense will sometimes say, Judge, there could be something exculpatory in here. We need the state to produce it, and we need them to produce specifically this so that we can listen, watch, or read to see if there is exculpatory evidence there.
I want to ask you about what we were talking about earlier on stream. We'll look for some more #HeyJB, hashtag the lawyer you know or lawyer you know. I'll look for LYK too, just because it's the cool thing to do. The cool kids with LYK in our comment section, man. 51 terabytes. Peter, if you were my attorney and you were defending me and 51 terabytes of evidence fell into your lap, your first gut reaction is what?
So you have a duty to go through it and see what's there. And you can't rely on whatever somebody else titles a document or a clip, right? You've got to actually sift through all of that, which is why I think some of the motions to compel could be to specify or answer the question specifically. We've had cases that are incredibly document intensive, construction litigation or wrongful death cases with tons of medical records or medical bills. And certain discovery questions can say, do you have this? And I can't provide 100,000 pages and say the answer is in there. I have to actually provide the document or the answer that they are requesting. So it's one thing for the state to say we turned over all the evidence. It's another thing for them to specifically answer a well-tailored request for production or an interrogatory request from the defense. So that could be some of what they're arguing about, or the defense could have gone through everything and said, it's not here and we know you have it.
So is it gamesmanship between the two sides? Is any of that going on?
So we know that there are timelines that you have to produce this stuff, right? 30 days to produce 51 terabytes of documents and to go through all of those. Maybe the state's saying it was impossible. We don't have the manpower or woman power to go through all of this. So here's everything we have. We're not hiding anything from you, but we can't go through it and specifically pull out documents within 30 days. So we want to make sure we're within the rules. We're discovering this to you. We're producing it. Here it is. You can use whatever it is you find in there. We're an open book right now with you. It might not be gamesmanship at all. It might just be a timing and a manpower issue.
We haven't brought really this up on this live stream yet, but I know that I was following you a little bit on Instagram. You know, we follow each other. We're pals like that.
Oh, yeah.
Tanya says, #lawyer, you know, what did you think of Dateline? The timing it came out. And in Tanya's opinion, all the speculation, no facts. I'll get into this here a little bit too, but Peter, why don't you go first?
Sure. And I mean, I'm sure there were facts in there, but there was some speculation as well. It's TV. That's kind of part of what you get when Dateline runs an episode like that. They want to make it interesting. They want to make it captivating. And this kind of also relates back to the very first comment about how we try to bring the facts and not be biased or point one way or the other and just kind of tell you what's going on and explain the process. And I think that as we look at this, as we see the Dateline show, and then as we hear from the judge today at the hearing you just streamed here on WFLA, the judge said rights, and there's irreparable harm going both ways. Rights are being violated. The Sixth Amendment right to the Constitution that the defendant has in this case, irreparable harm could be caused by the media. And I think he may have even said is potentially being caused at this point. And he's thinking about, I believe, Dateline NBC, documentaries, news shows that are going on and taking speculation, calling it fact, condemning Brian Kohberger, convicting him in the court of public opinion when he hasn't had his day in court yet. And regardless of what you think about his guilt or innocence, we have to understand how the process works and how we go through it, because the judge is going to look at that. He's going to look at this show, JB. He's going to look at mainstream media and say, how are they talking about this? If they're discussing it as they can't wait to hang this guy on the cross, he's not going to like that, and the gag order is going to be restricted. But if they're talking about it like you do, JB, in a way where this is what happens, what does it mean? What's the timeline? What are we looking at? What could standing silent mean? Those are the good questions. Those are, I think, what the judge would absolutely allow the media to talk about and would actually come forth with a less restrictive gag order if that was how most people are talking about it. I just don't think it is.
I can't help but wonder if the gag order is making the gag order being as restrictive as it is, and reporters having to go through back channels for information, if that is contributing to the overall problem here. It almost seems like a cycle where we're all caught in this this laundry machine cycle of information that is going around, and it's also, is it compromising the process? That's something, of course, that a judge has to take into consideration when they look at how the public is falling in. And also, too, we've talked about this so many times, how you go about jury selection in a case that is so mainstream. When everybody knows about it and everyone has formulated an opinion, that can make it very, very difficult to find an impartial jury.
Protecting the rights of the people in the courtroom comes first for the judge, and protecting that process. Then protecting the public and the First Amendment rights and what we all as the public have a right to is secondary. That's why it's a balancing act. Just because we want to know what's going on doesn't mean we're going to violate the rights of the criminal defendant or even the state if it's affecting the state. I absolutely agree with you. And it's not just in this aspect of life, but when you do restrict from legitimate information, people are going to go looking and searching and maybe reaching for less legitimate information. That absolutely can be a side effect. So how do you balance that? I think there's a way to write a gag order in effect that will allow things to be more open to the media while still not allowing interviews and, potential leaks from law enforcement or things that can be used or weaponized in the media to condemn people before they have their day in court or condemn some of the victims in the case. We've seen that going after victims. Why didn't they do this? That's what we have to be careful of, because everybody in the process needs to be protected.
Let's go to this question from Amber. Hashtags for us both. Now that he has, let's clarify this, because she's saying now that he has chosen a speedy trial, has he technically selected his right to a speedy trial? I mean, he hasn't chosen that, or has he? Would you verbalize it that way?
So I would say that he has not waived his right to a speedy trial.
Right.
And by not waiving your right to a speedy trial, you are saying that I get a trial in 6 months. That's how it works. Right. And if the state does things to delay the case, then they could say, we're demanding a speedy trial, and they're violating that right. But if the defense today would have agreed to a trial date next May, they would have in essence waived their right to a speedy trial and agreed to a trial date outside of the 6 months. Now, there are times where you can agree to a trial date next May and then later demand your right to a speedy trial and push the process quicker. There are pieces in place that have a shortened timeline that you can still keep your speedy trial rights, even though you've agreed to a later trial date. But many times, if you file the motion to continue or agree to continue a case, there are things that can happen that are effectual waivers throughout the process, and they absolutely did not do that today.
And again, I want to reiterate, as Peter noted earlier, and I want to make sure, because there was some confusion in the comment section. You are saying that there is a 5% chance, in your expert opinion, a 5% chance that this trial begins in early October, right? And a 95% chance it gets delayed. Is that correct?
Yeah. And again, it's a pure guess. Okay. So I could say in your expert opinion, but I have no crystal ball on when this case is going to go to trial. And as you and I have talked about, I think we talked about the Petito civil case. We talked about when's that going to happen. I told you a 0% chance it happens whenever the first trial date was for that.
You're right.
So, and that one I felt much more confident. The reason I put 5% here is certain times in these criminal cases, the defense will think it's actually better to get this thing rolling, not let it fester, not let the public just continue to rise up. Again, we saw it in the Murdaugh case. We actually saw, in my opinion, even though Alec Murdaugh lost, there was some benefit to the defense that they did push it to a speedy trial because it made the investigation look that much worse. And in this case, by waiving a speedy preliminary hearing, the defense was able to do some discovery. So in a normal case, if they would have arraigned him immediately and done the grand jury indictment immediately, they would have had a lot less time to prepare than they've already had to prepare in this case. So that's why I put it about 5%, because I don't expect it to happen, but I don't put it at 0. That's for sure.
There is a strategy here, no doubt, regarding the timeliness of the trial and how the chips fall, if you will, is going to be fascinating, both from a prosecution standpoint and from a defense standpoint. But I want to really quickly, we have other comments in the queue, and we're going to be getting to Brian Enton here shortly. So I want to try to get as many as we can, because I know that Peter doesn't have all day to be able to talk with us. As far as the trial being pushed out a couple of years from now, I mean, 2024, 2025, real quick.
So one of the hard things is once you start to continue it, once you waive your right to a speedy trial, then sometimes it can snowball and you can't get it to go fast enough. So that's why it lasts years. I wouldn't expect this one to last 4 or 5 years though. No.
We know this name. Azam says, hashtag HJB lawyer, and yeah, the golf emoji, which you see in Peter's chat all the time. Is the standing silent common during this process?
It is the least common plea, or if you're going to call it that, it's the least common approach. Usually you just plead guilty or you plead not guilty. But it does happen. It's not, unfounded or never happened before, or so shocking. And that's why there is a place in the law that it just basically means the same thing as a not guilty plea.
Do you think it is more likely that he chose that for himself, or that it was under the advice of his attorney and Taylor to use that option?
I would guess it's under the advice of counsel, but he does seem to understand the process and probably want to make some decisions for himself and maybe use some quirky legal angles.
Right, because we're talking about somebody who is studying criminology or has studied criminology. So we have to remember Brian Kohberger's background and how it fits in as far as how he devises his strategy. Not to mention also, he has had 5 months to think about this. I mean, the indictment was sudden and came, just last week. But at the same time, he's had a lot of time on his hand behind bars to think about, the different strategies that he might deploy given the likely outcomes that currently exist legally in this case. Let's go to Atharia. It's a pretty name. #lawyer. What could be exculpatory evidence except a solid alibi in this case, considering that they have his DNA at the scene of the crime? It's a very interesting question.
I mean, what could be exculpatory evidence is a pretty long answer. A ton of stuff could be. If one of the statements from one of the witnesses was that he was there, they were friends with him, and that's why he had a reason to be there. His DNA had a reason to be in there. One of the statements that somebody else, that there were multiple people in the house, that the DoorDash person is actually who they saw walk through the house. I mean, there's so much that could be exculpatory that it's hard to just pin down one thing. But it seems like if anything is exculpatory, most of it is pointing towards witness statements or timeline parts that could prove he didn't actually do this, which I don't know. We'll see.
Let's go to some others in our comment section while we have another couple of minutes. I'm just gonna put up this comment and just say, what are your percentage odds on the change of venue? How about that? Because this question, while it is asked in a hilarious way, what let's just focus on the question itself.
Sure.
The percentage chance of a change of venue.
I would put it at 50-50. We've seen stuff like this already happen in Idaho. We know the media attention on this is going to be next level compared to Lori Vallow, which was the last case that was in Idaho. That was big, that there was a change of venue. So I really put it at 50-50. Most cases are much, much less of a chance of a change of venue. That's actually a really high percentage chance of a change of venue.
That previous comment, by the way, is again proof I don't ignore. I'm always looking for the best comments, regardless. Hey. Yeah, just trying to get the best quality content possible here. Peter knows what I'm talking about. Low Country #Hey Lori, do you think Brian Kohberger is working on his own defense?
The only thing that would make me say no to this is Ann Taylor has conflicted off other cases kind of in a public way. She seems to be a good public defender, death penalty certified. She seems to be fighting for him. All of those are indications that they're working together. I don't want to say lawyers don't work as hard when a client's a jerk and wants to represent themselves and is demeaning them throughout the whole process. We've seen clients like that and cases like that in a high profile nature. So right now I would say no, but it's definitely something that we're going to have to follow into the future just with his background.
I'm going to the notepad. As we look here, this is a replay, folks, of the gag order feed, as I understand it. And as we look here at John Judge, the judge in this case, I want to bring up this one point. He paused when he was reading the names during the arraignment this morning, Peter, and he paused and he said, "Sorry, this is hard." As he was going through the names, some were noting about the pronunciation of some of those names in our comment section, but he seemed to pause a bit and even apologize to the court. Is there anything? We're seeing this judge really for the first time in this case. So what do you make of him and his hearings today, including the arraignment?
Well, just in the very short time I've had an opportunity to observe him, He seems like the type of judge that is going to make a call, is going to say what he thinks. Some judges don't. He is going to tip his hand a little bit, like I think he did to the media, and how he talked to them about their motion and what he found frustrating in it, or that he disagreed with in it, when he said, I don't mean to teach you, but you should know what it means when a higher court has a holding, and that was not it. And you called it a holding in your motion, when he talked to the media's lawyer. I think that he is the type of guy that's going to show a little more emotion as a judge than we may be used to in some of these other cases. And I think that was an indication of it when he was reading the names and kind of just understanding the gravity of this situation, which it affects everybody. Anybody that understands what happened, that does not mean he thinks Brian Kohberger did it. For him to think that what happened here is sad does not mean this is the guy who did it and I'm going to make sure he gets convicted. Not at all. It just means this is a sad situation and everybody understands that.
Mortar says, "Hey, lawyer, I noticed that when he paused, there was audible crying in the court. I think it might have made the judge emotional." Peter, we got to let you go. We've got Brian Enton standing by next. Peter, I know you're going to be doing live streams on this. Where can people find you?
So on YouTube, Lawyer is our YouTube channel. If you want to check out any of the videos we've already made or lives that we're going to do, hit the reminder bell, because we kind of do them at random times whenever I can. At Tragos Law on all other social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, etc. Would love to talk to you guys about the case, and I'm sure I'll be back here to hang out with JB some more.
Yeah, Peter, I always appreciate it, man. I enjoy our live streams together. Thank you so much, and good luck on your lives as well as you continue to cover this case.
Absolutely, and Brian's awesome, so enjoy him while you have him.
Yeah, we've got 10 minutes with everybody. Brian Enton. In fact, let's bring in Brian Enton now, joining us from outside the Latah County Courthouse. Hey there, Brian. Good to have you back on stream. You were in there. We were following your tweets every step of the way over the course of the arraignment and then the subsequent hearings that took place as well. How you doing today? And what's the latest from Idaho?
Yeah, hey, sorry, I wanted to be able to get live with you before the hearing, but it was so crowded outside. There were so many people lined up, and then it was kind of like a rush to get inside. It's such a small courtroom. I would say only like about 50 seats or so, and there were 25 family members that took up half the courtroom. So I was just so focused on getting in there, I wasn't able to come on with you this morning. But yeah, we're just outside now. Things have sort of settled down. You can imagine it was kind of crazy out here earlier.
You got leave it to Brian Enton, everybody, to apologize to us for not being on earlier. It's great to have you on now, Brian. So let's just talk about the case. I mean, everything was very procedural this morning as far as the arraignment, but a lot is being made of his choice to stand silent. We just had Peter Tragos, a legal expert who comes on stream with us quite a bit, and he said that is not something that you see very much as far as that legal option. What has been made of his decision to not verbalize his own not guilty plea?
Yeah, I think it was kind of a striking moment. I think most people expected them to say not guilty. I think there's probably like some procedural reasons, and Idaho law has some strange things that are different from other states. I was actually just before this trying to talk to an Idaho attorney who I talk to a lot, who I haven't been able to get on the phone yet. But I mean, clearly his intention at this point is that, to plead not guilty, that he thinks he's not guilty. I don't think they would have talked about the trial the way they did, going back and forth, picking the date, planning on having a trial at this point. But yeah, I mean, it surprised me. I think most of us expected, to hear the words not guilty out of his mouth, not out of the judge's.
As far as judge and his pause there in court, you were there. We've been talking about that moment where he had to just he apologized and said that this was hard for him. What was going on during that moment as the victims' names were being read aloud in court in today's arraignment?
Yeah, he definitely messed up some of the victims' names, several of them, and said Kayla instead of Kaylee. And I don't know what was going through his mind. I mean, obviously I was sitting there looking at him, but I don't know if he was emotional or just nervous. I mean, obviously it's a small courtroom. They don't deal with a lot of hearings with, so much media and that kind of a thing. But it definitely frustrated the families. I mean, you could, because it wasn't just one time, and you could kind of see the look on their faces. And then afterwards, I heard several of them saying that they thought that it was disrespectful. But emotions are already just so high, in there. It's so small, JB. I don't think people realize, because you just see that one camera angle, but it's a very, very small courtroom. So where the 25 family members are sitting is very, very close to Kohberger. And I think that everybody is very, very tense, in there.
Yeah. And of course, there also is the element of the gag order as well. And Gonzalez's family, I mean, they are, of course, frustrated with the gag order. We, of course, read out the statement from the family that you tweeted out. Have you had any additional conversation with them or the families of the other 3 victims as well, in relation to their reaction to seeing Bryan Kohberger in that courtroom today? And now that we have a trial date, even though there's always the chance, and according to Peter Tragos and others, there's a chance that gets delayed, perhaps even into 2024. As we hear from more people, where does this go from here, Bryan?
Well, you bring up the gag order. So they've not made a decision. The Judge John Judge, his last name is Judge. They haven't made a decision on that yet. They sort of pushed it off today, which is frustrating to Kaylee Gonzalez's attorney, because the way it's written now, there's a big question about whether he's even allowed to speak to the media. And that's why he hasn't, because, it could be a violation. And really his job is to speak to the media so that the family doesn't have to be the media spokesperson. So he's looking for clarity so that he can start doing that job again. And now he'll have to wait. So that's one component of it. The other component of it is the media coalition, which is sort of headed up by the Associated Press, has filed these complaints saying that the gag order is too strict and there's not enough public information. So the judge also didn't rule on whether he's going to make the gag order more lax. That's all going to come up at the hearing next month. So that's all to be continued. In terms of how the families are doing, I haven't spoken to the Gonzalez's at all, besides a couple quick texts about Olivia, Kaylee's sister's baby, just being really, really cute, because that was just an interesting moment in court that I haven't really seen before, wasn't expecting. Last time I interviewed Kaylee's sister, Olivia, she was pregnant. Well, she's now had the baby, and then she brought the baby to court in this sort of, I don't know what you call those things, like a coddle or whatever you have, like where you have the baby on the front of you. And so, there was sort of like the baby cooing noise throughout court, and you could tell that it was like the baby was really comforting the family. It was just a really kind of interesting, emotional dynamic having the baby there. And I think just added to the sort of just rawness of the whole experience inside that courtroom.
High emotions for sure. Especially, you could just tell, we were listening on live stream, or at least after the delayed feed came out, just how everything in the room felt like it changed when we started to hear Kaylee's name and Xana's name and Ethan's name and Maddie's name. It was just, it was a moment for sure, because it brings everything back, of course, the 4 victims in this case. Bryan, do you have a free 5 minutes for just some questions before we let you go?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Hashtag, if you need to hop off, you let me know. You know how it works. Hashtag Hey Bryan, hashtag Hey JB. If you use one of those hashtags, we can take it to News Nation senior national correspondent Brian Enton. James says hashtag Hey Bryan. And this is for you, as far as your observations. Any surprises for you in court today?
No. I mean, the fact that they set a trial date, I wasn't fully expecting. Of course, like you said, from some of the guests you've had on, that can change and can be delayed, and who knows what will really happen. But they did seem confident when both sides agreed on the October 2nd date, and I wasn't really expecting that. So that was kind of a surprise. Again, just just the eeriness of being in there, honestly. I'm in Florida too most of the time. I'm from Florida like you, JB. I'm used to big courtrooms. There's just something when you're in a space that small with an accused killer and the families, that's just weird. So that it didn't surprise me, but was just it's a strange situation. In terms of, a lot of people have been asking me, did Kohberger look different? From the last time I saw him, he looks basically the same to me. Maybe his hair was a little longer. I mean, just a minor thing. And, you know, he has some sort of protective vest or something on underneath his jumpsuit. So he did look kind of big, but I think he's very skinny. That's just the vest. But yeah, those were sort of the things that stood out to me.
And also, too, while I have you on stream here, Brian, was there any video that you and the News Nation team captured of him leaving the courthouse, or is he still at the courthouse? Has he been transported back to jail?
Well, it's interesting, JB, because I mean, again, I don't think people realize how small this community is. I mean, the courthouse is like 2 courtrooms, very, very small. The jail where he stays is under the courtroom. Okay. Like right in the same little building. There's not a lot of cells down there. So they just bring him up some stairs and he goes to the hearing and then he goes right back to the basement.
Got it. I didn't know it was that close as far as on the premises. Let's go back to the questions that are coming in from people. Colin wants to know, and we'll go here to this feed. Oh, hold on one more second. There it is. Colin says, #KJB, #KBrian. Is it true that Olivia complained to victims' rights about the name pronunciations? This is a good opportunity for us to try to, again, some of the social media chatter out there, clear up misinformation, do our part as journalists to set the record straight. Have there been any complaints formally, put forth about the name pronunciations by Judge?
Yeah, I don't think it, at least from what I could tell, was a formal complaint, but she did say something when the hearing ended, just sort of in her group, and there was also what appeared to be like a victim's advocate there. But I don't think it was so much as a formal complaint as just being sort of frustrated that that the name pronunciation wasn't right.
Let's go to some other comments that are coming in. Allie wants to know, #KBrian, why do you think the Kohbergers didn't show up today and say, Allie is giving her opinion in the comment as well, saying, I think they want to avoid the media, but it must be hard for Brian Kohberger not having them supporting him in court. As far as the Kohberger family and communication with them, even in all these months since January when we last saw Brian in court, I mean, what have we heard? And do we have any understanding as to why they haven't been or why they weren't here today?
Yeah, so they were in court initially in Pennsylvania when he made his first appearance. And it's my understanding, and I haven't had any new information in probably a couple of months. But the last that I had information from that side, it was that they are not in a good financial situation. This is obviously a long way from Pennsylvania, so there would be money involved to get here. So that could be a component. You mentioned, I mean, the media, although they were there in Pennsylvania, and there was probably more media at his first appearance, and they made the decision to be there. So I think it could be a financial issue. I've reported in the past, and I think the situation has also changed. But at one point, his sisters had lost their jobs, and it obviously not easy being Brian Kohberger's family right now. So I think all of those things probably contributed.
Brian Enton of News Nation joining us here, everybody, on WFLA now. Brian, just really quickly, I always ask you at the end of our streams, how you holding up? Life treating you okay? I know a lot of people always follow you for your reporting, but also just because, what they think of you as being a stand-up guy. How you doing out there in Idaho?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, no, I'm doing okay. It's weird being back. I was just talking to Lauren and Luis, who are out here with me. It's weird being back here just because we were here for so long, for I think over a month at one point. And, it's just weird being back in Moscow, seeing all the same places. It's kind of a sad feeling. The weather is a lot different. It's warmer, which is nice. But again, I don't know. The whole courtroom thing today was really just strange and emotional for the families. And that's kind of what I'm hung up on, just being in that room, being so close to them and close to Kohberger, all in the same spot. It's just a very, very, you just can't imagine what they must go through, how they're supposed to process that.
I can hear it in your voice, and I can assure you the camera doesn't do it justice as far as how small this courtroom actually was. It definitely, without question, based on what you're saying and your account of it, it definitely looks bigger on camera than it does, I'm sure, with how it felt in that room today, especially when you're talking about it being, jam-packed with people. Brian, we really appreciate it. Everybody, please give a follow. You probably already do if you're watching this live stream, but please give a follow to News Nation's Brian Entin and pass along our best. Brian, I know that you're with a great team out there from News Nation. We appreciate you taking the time.
All right. Thanks, JB. Have a good day.
Yeah, you as well, Brian. All right, back here with you live, folks, on WFLA now. As we look here, this is a tight shot of Brian Kohberger, and people have been messaging me about his eyebrows being, the hair of his eyebrows being longer, like his eyebrows being bushier. I mean, that goes to show the level of micro-analysis that is going on social media. And I do my very best always to try to bring up the questions that are poignant, the questions that are crazy, but also, most importantly, the questions that people believe are true on social media, but maybe aren't, or misguided information that exists on social media and questions about that. We try our very best here to do what we can interactively, to be a voice for you in a place where on the internet so much misinformation exists. But if we can take your questions, quite literally spotlight your name and your question or your comment, even your profile picture here on stream, and we can talk with you guys back and forth, the questions that you have are very likely similar to the questions that thousands or millions others have. So what we try to do, this is our venture into interactive journalism here at WFLA. We try to always bring you breaking news. We try to bring you interactive journalism. And also, too, we are expanding our digital programming in this room. We're doing a lot more shows in here as well that doesn't pertain to true crime and doesn't pertain. We have a show called Tracking the Tropics that season 5 of Tracking the Tropics launches in here for the first time in the Stream Center on June 1st. Us being here in the Tampa Bay area, we do a show called Bucks Bonus for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So we do breaking news, interactive live streaming, interactive journalism, and then also as well the third, we do original digital content shows for our audience that on things that people want to hear about and engage with us about. So that's what we do here in this room. There's one more very important thing that we have to highlight here on this live stream, and it pertains to this right here. What is coming next in the Gabby Petito, Brian Laundrie lawsuit? As a reminder, Gabby Petito's parents, Joe Petito and Nicole Schmidt, have filed a lawsuit against the parents of Brian Laundrie, alleging intentional infliction of emotional distress, in essence claiming that the parents of Brian Laundrie were aware that Gabby Petito was murdered and that they chose to do, in essence, really nothing other than issue a statement through their attorney, Stephen Bertolino, who has now been added as a co-defendant. While things have been relatively dormant in that particular case, it's about to get, there's going to be a lot more movement on it on Wednesday. On Wednesday afternoon, and I'll be tweeting out and sharing out details about the exact time our coverage begins. But this Wednesday, so in less than 48 hours from now, we will be live right here where you're watching on this platform, whether it's you're watching on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, TikTok Live, WFLA.com, the WFLA app, wherever you're watching from. We're on a lot of different platforms at this very moment. But we're going to be live breaking down perhaps one of the most significant pieces of evidence that exists in the lawsuit, and that is the letter that Roberta Laundrie, Brian Laundrie's mother, wrote to her son, Brian Laundrie, at the timing of which we don't know exactly when this letter was written, but Gabby Petito's family is alleging that this letter has damning information in it about how much they knew regarding their son's murder of Gabby Petito. And so there's so much more to come out of that. Because of where we currently stand with this lawsuit. It is heading to a jury trial next year. And while the pretrial hearings are few and far between these days, a big one is occurring on Wednesday because a judge is expected to issue a ruling on whether or not Roberta Laundrie's letter will be granted during discovery and basically admissible as evidence in the lawsuit itself. That's basically where things are heading. I'm kind of giving you the Cliff Notes version of it, but that is really significant on Wednesday. Some of the pretrial hearings have been very procedural in that case. Others have been more noteworthy. This is one of the more noteworthy ones. Also, Stephen Bertolino, his motion to dismiss the lawsuit in its entirety through
Okay, so you know, we were just talking a lot. He started going into the Gabby Petito, which I am following, but I don't think has anything to do with Idaho 4. So we'll go ahead and stop him here, since it doesn't look like he's going to do any more. Oh, what happened here? Since he's not doing, doesn't seem like he's going to be doing any more coverage on the sorry about that. Any more coverage on the actual
It's weird being back.
Okay, let me stop that. So what is happening? I'm just going to do a really quick recap now that I have you all here. And let me end this. Let me get out of here. Great. Okay, so thank you so much for everyone who has stuck around this whole time. So a couple of things. One, just to recap here then. First, he was arraigned today in the court. So he had an option to do a guilty, not guilty, or standing silent plea. He went with standing silent, which effectively makes him is a not guilty plea. Okay. So that happened, number one. Number two, the court date, they're actually set the trial for October 2nd, which gives it stays within, because it's a 4 to 6 week trial estimated. It falls within the 6-month speedy trial. Will that happen? Peter Tragos from Tragos Law thinks there's a 5% chance that it'll actually happen on October 5th, on October 2nd in that time frame. So very possible that they'll waive the speedy trial and push the dates back, largely probably because of 51 tetrabytes of information that the defense has to sift through to get, to get whatever evidence that they need for their defense case. That's the second piece. The third piece is that the gag order was was discussed as scheduling conference. They're going to separate the hearings. On June 9th, there's going to be one hearing for the Gonzalez families to discuss their matter, which is really to amend the non-dissemination order so that the Gonzalez attorney can speak as their spokesperson. The second hearing is going to be for the AP and media group to basically end the gag order. So the Gonzalez family doesn't necessarily have a problem with the gag order. They just want to amend it so that the attorney can speak on behalf of the Gonzalez family, right? So then the third thing is that there's they did have the motion to compel discovery portion, and so there's going to be another hearing set on June 27th to just as an evidentiary hearing. So those are, gosh, I am tired. I feel like I'm like, I got my little cafecito over here, and it's been a ride. So thank you to everyone who stayed with us, who we're learning here together. I had not actually ever heard of a standing still plea. So I'm glad that came up, because now we can learn, and now we know, right? To me, it's a little suspicious, but this is a criminology person. So maybe he was either did it on his own, he thought of that, or his attorney was on advice of his attorney. So what do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And I'm going to end this live stream today. I'll probably splice up some stuff together and post again. But thank you for being here. Thank you for staying with it. It's been a fascinating, very interesting day. I knew I was going to be dedicated to this today. So learned a lot, and happy to be here with you. If you haven't, please hit the thumbs up so that helps me in the algorithm. Subscribe to my channel. I'm almost at 1,000 subscribers. So I'd really appreciate if you subscribe and join the Empowering family. And with that, I will say bye. Remember to keep it empowering, and always follow your intuition. Stay safe, stay thriving, and have an empowering week. Bye for now.